If everybody could take their seats, it's 9 o'clock and we'd like to get started. So this is an official meeting of the Dental Board of California for Thursday, May 11th, 2017. Welcome to our quarterly meeting. I want to ask all of us to please turn our cell phones to silent and make sure they're off the table to avoid feedback noise. You may notice board members accessing their laptops during the meeting. They are using their laptops solely to access the board meeting materials that are in electronic format. This is an official business meeting of the Dental Board of California. The board welcomes public comment on any items on the agenda, and is the board's intent to ask for public comment prior to the board taking action on any agenda item. If for some reason I forget to ask for public comment and you wish to speak on that item, please raise your hand and you will be recognized. Depending on the number of people who would like to testify, a time limit may be imposed. We ask all speakers to please stay on topic, and if a time limit is determined, keep your comments to that time limit. I would like to call the meeting to order and ask staff to please call the roll.
Dr. Witcher.
Present.
Dr. Stewart.
Here.
Ms. Burton. Dr. Chan.
Here.
Ms. Chappell Ingram.
Here.
Ms. Forsyth.
Here.
Ms. King. Dr. Lai.
Here.
Dr. Lay.
Here.
Ms. McKenzie.
Here.
Ms. Medina.
Here.
Dr. Morrow.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. And with that, we will now adjourn and go into closed session. We will resume for discussion of items on the agenda promptly at 11 a.m. Thank you. Everybody to note that Fran Burton has joined the meeting. We're coming out of closed session now and going back into open session. Welcome to the Dental Board of California quarterly meeting. Today is May 11th. I want to ask all of us to please turn off our cell phones and make sure they're off the table. You may notice board members accessing their laptops. They use these solely to access board meeting materials. This is an official business meeting of the Dental Board of California. We welcome public comment on any item on the agenda, and it is the board's intent to ask for public comment prior to the board taking action on any item. If for some reason I forget to ask for public comment on an agenda item and you wish to speak, please raise your hand and you will be recognized. Depending on the number of people who would like to testify on a particular item, a time limit may be imposed. We ask all speakers to please stay on topic, and if a time limit is determined to be necessary, please keep your comments within that time limit. And with that, I would like to call the meeting to order. So, thank you for that. A couple of operational items. First of all, restrooms are just outside. Another thing is we will be changing the order of items on the agenda slightly depending on time availability. We may move up the Reg committee meeting before lunch depending on how things go. So I'd like to start off here with introduction of new board member. We have very pleased to have with us here Abigail Medina from San Bernardino. She was recently appointed by the speaker, and maybe she could say a few words about herself.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm Abigail Medina, of course, San Bernardino Unified School District board member. I'm one of the vice presidents there. And San Bernardino is the 8th largest district in the state of California. We manage over $500 million of funding, and we look at certain programs. And just to say some positive things from our district, we actually, since the 70s or 60s, we have never surpassed the county average of high school graduations. And since being on the board, we have not only surpassed county averages, but now we have surpassed state averages, so we're doing some great stuff there. And the community that I'm coming from in San Bernardino represents one of the hardest hit areas. We had the shooting at North Park, and so we see a lot of stuff that's going on. And I'm just very proud to be part of an organization that looks at access and looks at these kind of issues pertaining to dental health. So thank you for having me.
Okay, thank you so much for being here. With that, I'd like to just take a moment and introduce a few of our guests. I unfortunately won't be able to introduce everybody, and so as you come up and speak, we'll make sure all the various stakeholder organizations are recognized. But I believe we have with us Laura Purcell from California Society of Periodontics, Terry Iwamoto Wong from Academy of General Dentistry. Thank you for coming. Paul Rijardo, California Society of Pediatric Dentistry. And Lisa Okamoto from California Dental Hygiene Association, I believe. Thank you. And thank you very much, Tony Lum, Executive Officer of the Hygiene Committee, for being here. I know I was at your meeting, and we'll say a few words about that. I think Senator Polanco just joined us as well. Thank you for coming. Okay, and as I say, if there's anybody, CDA representatives, Dr. Felsenfeld and Mary McCoon and Brianna Pittman, thanks for coming. And we'll get around to introducing everybody else as we kind of move forward. Thank you. Next item is our election of board secretary. As some of you know, our previous secretary is no longer with the board, so we would like to move forward and open nominations. Ms. Burton.
I'd like to move Yvette Chappelle Ingram, please.
Okay. Are there any additional nominations for secretary? Seeing none, nominations are now closed. Are we ready to vote? Oh, do you accept the nomination?
Yes, I do.
Okay, thank you. Okay, jumping the gun a little there. Okay, so we're ready to vote. Would you please call the roll? I think I'll ask staff to call the roll here. Yeah.
Okay. Dr. Witcher,
Yes.
Dr. Stewart,
Yes.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Chan,
Yes.
Ms. Chappelle Ingram,
Yes.
Ms. Forsythe,
Yes.
Dr. Lai, Dr. Lay,
Yes.
Ms. McKenzie,
Yes.
Ms. Medina,
Yes.
Dr. Morrow.
Yes.
It passes.
Okay, thank you and congratulations.
Yes.
We're very pleased you're taking this position. Next, moving on to my report, and I will be brief. I'll just report on some of my activities since the last meeting. April 23rd, I attended CDA Care's sponsored free healthcare event in San Mateo. I think some of the rest of you were also there. Charitable services totaling nearly $1.6 million were provided to almost 2,000 people, thanks to more than 2,300 volunteers, including 930 dentists and dental professionals. And of course, this isn't possible without dental students, community members, and a lot of volunteers who make this happen. The next CDA Cares Clinic will be held October 6th through 7th in Bakersfield, and Dr. Stewart informed me he is on the local arrangements committee, so it's great to see. Those are very impressive events. Following that, I attended CDA Presents in Anaheim on May 5th, and I attended the Dental Board informational booth along with members of the enforcement staff at the exhibit hall, and I know it's a nice opportunity for us to do some public outreach there and provide information. You get interesting questions about pretty much everything. It's a good way to, like Jeopardy on the Dental Practice Act, you know, how much do you know? And of course, we get a lot of help from staff with that. And then the following day, May 6th, I attended the Dental Hygiene Committee meeting, and this was a good opportunity to hear about the activities of the committee. I understand they share many of the same issues and concerns as the Dental Board, for instance, upcoming sunset review, a long list of regulatory packages to prepare, staff recruitment, and educational program reviews, which they're doing, and we're starting to embark on that as well. And I presented basically an update at that meeting on status of infection control regulations, AB 1174 regulations, including determination of radiographs and placement of ITRs, and the status of the RDA practical examination, which we'll hear about later this morning. And finally, for all the board members, we did get some information from our executive officer, who I'm sorry can't be here with us today. She's greatly missed. We have our capable stand-in here, our executive assistant AEO, so I'm sure that will go fine. But she did provide to us a link to the California Dental Public Health Department report, Status of Oral Health in California 2017, which is a really nice accumulation of everything that's out there. And it's really well worth reviewing. I hope all the board members had a chance to look at this. It concludes that oral diseases are highly prevalent in all stages of life among California residents. And these diseases are correlated with socioeconomic factors, education, and a lot of other things. Also, effective preventive measures are available. Both clinical dental services and community-level interactions are underutilized. The report also shows there are geographic variations with respect to availability of services, something that we all know. It's a distribution problem. Although data are available, in many cases the data is not current. So we really need newer and better data. And because of this, it was difficult to determine trends and patterns of diseases and risk factors. And this highlights the need for surveillance and evaluation as a critical component of the overall state health program. So again, as now we have a California dental health director, we have a report, and we are seeing activity in that area, things like some of the activity around Medi-Cal fee increase legislation and so on. So we're hoping that that report serves as an anchor for future access issues. So with that, I would now like to move forward to approval of the minutes. We have the approval of the minutes of the February 23rd and 24th meeting, and I would like to ask that be tabled definitely to the next meeting, postponed definitely to the next meeting. So we won't move that item at this time. Any discussion or thoughts on that? Everybody in agreement? Thank you. Oh, our council informs me we need a motion to table.
I'll move that we'll defer the approval of the minutes of the February meeting until next dental board meeting.
Second.
Okay. I guess we need a roll call then.
Okay.
Can we have a discussion on that?
Yes, if you wish.
Could you share with us the reason for your desire to postpone those minutes until a future meeting?
I think they need additional review and corrections.
Okay. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. Calling the roll. Dr. Witcher,
Yes.
Dr. Stewart,
Yes.
Fran Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Chan,
Yes.
Yvette Chappelle, yes. Judith Forsythe? Yes. Dr. Lai? Dr. Lay?
Yes.
Meredith McKenzie?
Yes.
Abigail Medina?
Yes.
Dr. Morrow?
Yes.
Mr. President, we have.
Okay, so the minutes are tabled. Next, I'd like to ask for a motion to approve the minutes of the April 6, 2017 special board meeting held in Sacramento.
Well, I move that we accept the minutes of the April meeting.
Okay, so moved by Lay, seconded by Forsythe. Thank you.
Great.
Any discussion? None? Okay.
Taking the row. Dr. Witcher,
Yes?
Dr. Stewart,
Yes.
Fran Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Chan,
Abstain, I wasn't there.
Yvette Chappelle Ingram, yes. Judith Forsythe? Yes. Kathleen King, absent. Dr. Lay?
Yes.
Dr. Lai? Meredith McKenzie?
Abstain.
Abigail Medina?
Abstain. I wasn't here.
You
Abstain.
were?
Yeah, I wasn't here.
You were.
You were.
Oh, that was my first, oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Dr. Morrow?
Yes.
Okay, we have the row.
Okay, thank you. Next, I'd like to convene the joint meeting of the Dental Board and the Dental Assisting Council. Will the council members please come forward and be seated on the dais? Okay, could we go ahead and call the roll, please?
Okay, we'll start with the full board. Dr. Witcher,
Yes?
Dr. Stewart,
Yes.
Fran Burton,
Here.
Dr. Chan,
Yes.
Bit Chappell Ingram here, Judith Forsythe. Here. Dr. Lott. Here. Dr. Lay.
Here.
Meredith McKenzie.
Here.
Abigail Medina.
Here.
Dr. Morrow.
Here.
We have a quorum.
We need council.
Council.
Okay, roll for the Dental Assisting Council. Ann Contreras, present. Pamela Davis-Washington.
Here.
Tamara McNeely.
Here.
Jennifer Rodriguez.
Here.
Judith Forsythe.
Here.
And Dr. Ross Lai. Here. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Now we need to move approval of the minutes of the February 23rd meeting. Could I have a motion?
Actually, if I could, I think there was, we needed to change, I had approved the minutes of the December meeting, but I should have abstained.
So could we note a correction, but the item on the,
Correction.
thank you, but the item on the floor is to request for approval of the February minutes.
Okay, sorry.
But thank you for that. No, I don't have a motion.
I move we accept the minutes as presented.
Okay. Okay, so Contreras second, moved by Morrow. So there, any board members have any comments or corrections on the minutes? Seeing none, we can go ahead and call, okay, we can go ahead and call the roll, thank you.
Okay. Dr. Witcher,
Yes.
Dr. Stewart,
Yes.
Fran Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Chan,
Yes.
Yvette Chappell Ingram, yes. Judith Forsythe.
Yes.
Dr. Lott. Yes. Dr. Lay.
Yes.
Meredith McKenzie.
Abstain.
Abigail Medina. Dr. Morrow.
Yes.
Ann Contreras, yes. Pamela Davis-Washington.
Yes.
Tamara McNeely.
Yes.
Jennifer Rodriguez.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The minutes are approved. Now we'll move to item number 3, update on dental assisting exam statistics.
Good morning. My name is Sarah Wallace. I'm the Assistant Executive Officer of the Board. I'm going to present today the examination statistics. Before the Board and Council, we have provided the written examination statistics for the RDA written exam, the RDA Law and Ethics, the RDA EF practical and clinical examinations, as well as the EF written examination and the OA and DSA written examinations. The examination statistics are broken out in Excel sheet form, broken out by program for you here today. As reported at previous board meetings, we are still working with the BREEZE system, so unfortunately, we're not able to disseminate statistics that show the first-time test takers versus the retake test takers. to show that difference. And then we're still having issues pulling data relating to the OJT and the combined work experience / education category of applicants. And so we don't have that breakdown to show as well either today. I am available to answer any questions that you might have relating to the examination statistics.
Okay, any board member discussion on the statistics? Council members? Okay, being this is an informational item, no vote is required. Is there any public comment on this item? Okay, seeing none, could we move ahead with update to dental assisting licensing statistics?
The licensing statistics for all of the registered dental assisting licensing categories are provided in the board members' meeting materials and also available online. There isn't much difference from the last board meeting other than an increase due to applications we've received since the February board meeting. We have provided a breakdown of the licensing population by county as of the end of March. And then staff has also provided a breakdown of the number of applications that have been received, approved, licenses issued by month, and then those applications that have been withdrawn. And then we've also provided graphics for the board and committees, council's review.
Yeah, this is very interesting information. It's kind of seeing we've seen this for dentists. We haven't really looked at it for assistants very much, and the graphics are very much appreciated. I know Dr. Chan asked for that, and it's nice to see it in that form. Okay, board member comments? Public comment? Okay, moving along. Update regarding the review of RDA practical examination.
So, as we shared at the February board meeting, the review was still being conducted by the Office of Professional Examination Services. Towards the end of March, the board staff, Karen Fisher and I, were approached by OPS with their findings of the practical examination and their recommendation that the practical examination be suspended immediately. And so we called a special meeting of the board on April 6th of 2017 in Sacramento, California. And we had a quorum of the board present who considered the OPES report in closed session and took action to suspend the examination immediately. Due to that action, the board was able to cancel the April, May, and July examinations, and we've also canceled the examinations for the duration of the year. The OPES report has been shared on the board's website. A notification was posted and shared with stakeholder groups, and then also disseminated to licensees. Word quickly spread, and we started getting a lot of questions coming in. Essentially, what has happened right now is that the examination is suspended through July 1st of 2017 pursuant to what is in current statute. Because of the July 1st, 2017 date that's in statute that effectively reinstates the practical exam, and the fact that the board can no longer administer the practical exam because it's been deemed not a comprehensive assessment of the RDA profession, we will no longer be able to offer that examination. And so to avoid the potential for barrier to licensure in the state after July 1st of 2017, board staff met with Assembly B&P committee staff, and we have requested that there be urgency legislation put in place that would extend that suspension date to July 1st of 2020 or until the board determines other options, whichever occurs first. And so we'll be discussing that in the next agenda item. I also had the opportunity to attend the KDAT and CDAA annual meeting in San Jose at the end of April and was able to speak to a lot of educators and CDAA members. And so my thanks to the organizers of that meeting. I received a lot of good feedback from that. As a result of that meeting, board staff is working on revising the RDA practical, it was the RDA practical examination application. It's going to be just the RDA application for licensure. So in the next few weeks, we're expecting to be able to post this new revised application that doesn't reference the practical examination or the request for the location of the practical examination. I was also able to share a lot of other additional licensing information, and it seemed to have been received well by the community. We've posted information online. We're developing an FAQ to be posted on our board's website. Staff is in the process of reviewing every file that we have in our file room and making the determination of how to move forward. Because of a legal opinion that we received during our sunset review in 2015, it was determined that should the practical examination be suspended, that the board did have the authority to continue the licensure based on the passing of the law and ethics and the written examination. And so that's the direction we're moving in right now. So the question right now, that's kind of the gray area, is what happens if we don't have the urgency legislation in July 1st of 2017 to those applicants that are applying after. So I'm hopeful that we will have the legislation. Additional information will be shared as it's provided to us and we put a plan together. I'd be happy to answer any questions that the board has today or the council. The next step in this process is for OPES to continue the study of the practical examination and to determine what alternatives there are for the board and the council to consider for licensure. We don't have alternatives to share today, obviously, since the meeting just happened last month. However, today staff is requesting that the board and the council direct staff to contract with OPES to continue the study. The study would include the continuation of subject matter expert workshops to determine what those alternatives would be, and that those alternatives be brought back to the board at a future meeting.
We have an action item on the table here. Could I have a motion to approve that item? And then we can open it for discussion. Burton, Morrow, second?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, discussion, board member discussion.
I have a question regarding the eligibility for applicants to the RDA licensure that have previously been unsuccessful in passing the practical examination. Do they now reapply for that license, and how far back can that go?
We are requesting that applicants that had previously applied and failed the practical examination to not submit a new application to the board. What the process that we're following right now is going through every file in our file room, which includes every application that we've had for quite a few years. There is a regulation in place for the abandonment of an application, which states that essentially if an applicant has failed to retake a failed component of an examination within 2 years, or fails to address a deficiency within the application, then that application can be abandoned. So our process right now is twofold. We're abandoning those applications that qualify to be abandoned, and then reviewing those applications where the applicant has successfully completed the law and ethics and the written examinations, but has failed the practical examinations, and they've met all of the other licensure requirements. If they complete all of the requirements and they are deemed as complete, then they are going to be issued their license.
Thank you.
Tamara.
Clarification on that statement, how far back are you looking if they pass both the law and ethics and the chair side exams but failed the practical? How far back are we looking?
It's going to be on a case-by-case basis, but I would say pending, what the regulation says is essentially 2 years.
Okay.
I can't give a definitive answer because there are some folks that have continued to retake their failed examination, so it's on a case-by-case basis. But, knowing that the examination started to have issues beginning in 2014, those applications to now are definitely under review.
Okay, that was my question, that was my concern. If I may.
Yes.
May I ask a question? So what is the filing date process going to look like moving forward, since we don't have the practical exam and the candidates are scheduling their examinations on their own?
Right. So what we're asking the educators to do now, and all applicants, is actually we're maintaining the filing dates. The reason being, that's how Breeze has been structured, and so we're having to develop workarounds for this process. And so part of the workaround is to have this filing period so that it's essentially a beginning date and a cutoff date of when we're having applications for report pulling processes. That's really the only reason. If they continue to apply after, that's fine, but there's going to be a beginning date and an end date for applying so that we're able to access and pull a valid report with the data that we need.
So the current dates that have been posted are going to stay in place? Those aren't going to be modified?
Correct. We're just no longer offering the practical examination.
I have another question, if I may. I know it's policy to, once an applicant applies, they have 2 years. I have a concern about that because I know as an educator, the longer someone waits to take an exam, the fail rate goes up. Just for consideration to the board, that we may want to tighten that up to a year versus 2 years or even less after someone applies. I think 2 years is just way too long for a successful pass rate.
That would require a regulatory change.
So I'm
And
putting it out
staff
there.
can make a note of it for future to bring back to the board.
So if we can, if I could, ask for that to be agendized so we can take have discussion on it.
Any other comments from council members, board members? Seeing none, I'd like to open this to public comment.
Okay, I'm not. It's not going.
Yeah, I think it's on.
Oh, it's on. Okay. All right. No, I can understand technology. Brianna Pittman, California Dental Association. Just would note that the language of the bill right now does not look like it's an urgency measure. It has a majority vote rather than 2/3. So it would need to be considered an urgency measure for it to be able to go into effect by July 1 if it were passed. So staff may already be on top of that. Just thought I'd make that comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a point here.
Yes.
This mic system is so bad, I have no idea what you said. It's not you, but the mic system is
Just need to make it closer.
so
Yeah,
bad.
you got to be right on it, yeah.
We agree, it's really hard to get back here started.
Yeah.
We can't hear you. Just bring the mic closer.
I think that's it.
Brianna Pittman, California Dental Association. Just commenting that the legislation as written is not an urgency measure. It doesn't have the 2/3 vote requirement. And so if that's the intent, that would just need to be changed to have the 2/3 vote to be an urgency to be passed and go into effect immediately by the July 1 date.
Okay, additional public comment?
Kara Miyazaki, Foothill College and Dental Assisting Educators Group.
Melody Randolph, Dental Assisting Educators Group in Sacramento City College. And we would just like to present information to you. We took a survey of the dental assisting educators in our group regarding this issue, and just wanted to make you aware. We sent the results to Sarah, and we can disseminate them. We took it word for word from what everybody said, and I have a spreadsheet with names and what schools they represent and everything, so that you're assured of the results being accurate. The vast majority, a strong majority out of 57 educators across California, over 76% of them said we definitely support and need some kind of clinical hands-on examination. We termed it fix the practical, but we're certainly open to other options. But as the OPES analysis states, that they feel strongly, and we want to emphasize and reiterate the fact that some type of clinical skill evaluation is a critical component to RDA licensure. So in whatever form or shape that takes, we strongly agree with OPES's recommendation. In opposition to that, having doctors check off or sign off skill evaluation, only one of the educators polled responded that that would be an effective, good tool. We can certainly go into a huge, long list of how that would be ineffective, the problems with that as a viable tool for sign off or check off on RDA skills. A lot of issues with that, so we strongly disagree with that as an option.
It was also mentioned that if the dentist were to sign off, that it's sort of creates an inequality for educators that are required to have 30 hours of methodology, but a dentist can sign off their OJT, their dental assistant, to receive their RDA.
Question?
Sarah tells me she has that information she can share with us, so we'll be looking forward to receiving that. Thank you.
And we would love to work with, as our group, any of the dental assisting educators would love to be a part of and work with. One of the things we questioned in the OPS analysis is that there is a conflict of interest of educators being involved in the process. And we would love a explanation on how that would be a conflict of interest. We're the ones that understand and know the criteria on RDA functions. We have our teaching methodology. We're the experts in grading and evaluating clinical skills, RDA clinical skills. So how or why it would be a conflict of interest to cut us out of the process.
And also, it seems like there's an inequality when they have the licensure by portfolio at the dental schools, and the dental faculty can be examiners. So they're educators being the examiners, but the educators for dental assisting can't be involved in the process. So that's something that we would just like to have answered or addressed. And we would hope that the survey also is shared with OPES too, because a lot of the educators gave feedback on what they thought could be an appropriate alternative. And it's not just a practical exam. There are many other ideas that they had as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comment on this agenda item? Seeing none, we have this on the table. It's a motion to direct staff to contract with OPES to initiate a process to thoroughly evaluate options other than a practical examination for ensuring the competency of RDAs to perform the clinical procedures identified as a necessary component of the RDA licensure, and develop alternative options to address RDA competency for the board to consider at a meeting in the near future.
So moved.
Okay,
Been moved and seconded.
thank you. So we'll go ahead and call the roll now.
Okay. Dr. Witcher,
Yes.
Dr. Stewart,
Yes.
Fran Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Chan,
Yes.
Yvette Chappelle Ingram, yes. Judith Forsythe,
Yes.
Ross Lai,
Yes.
Dr. Lake,
Yes.
Meredith McKenzie,
Yes.
Abigail Medina,
Yes.
Dr. Morrow.
Yes.
Ann Contreras? Yes. Pamela Davis Washington?
Yes.
Tamara McNeely?
Yes.
Jennifer Rodriguez?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I believe that passes. Oh, do we have any comments from OPES on this item? I know, I see Ms. Linzer there.
Good morning. I'm just here to answer any questions that the board may have about the report or process, so I don't have any comments, but we're given your approval, we are going to work toward developing other options for the board to consider to assess make sure that the RDA clinical skills are assessed as part of the licensure process. Is there any questions?
Dr. Witcher?
Yes, Dr. Morrow.
Could you give us any prediction as to a time that you might be able to report to us options that you recommend?
At the August board meeting.
I'm sorry?
At the August board meeting,
August.
we will have the
Okay,
options.
great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Judy.
I'd just like to go on record, since OPES is here, to say that I agree with the dental assistant educators. We really need to keep in mind that how these individuals learn. And you're the exam expert. We aren't. That's why we have hired you. But really keep that in mind. I think it's really important that we very much consider a practical exam to continue, whatever that is. I mean, that remains up to you, but I'd just like to go on the record to say that I do agree with them.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Tamara.
Just a point of reference. Currently, any approved program and standalone program has a clinical component that we certify in. For an unlicensed dental assistant's radiation safety, there are 2 RDA duties, coronal polish and Pitt and Fisher sealants. Those are already in place in the institutions and with standalone courses. So it'd be very easy to use those 2 items as a vehicle for licensure to take a look at, or a portfolio way, without too much impact on the institutions as it is. We're grading them. We have the autonomy to certify. I just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention.
Thank you. I see we have some additional public comment.
Yeah, I'm sorry, we missed the opportunity. My name is Pam Baldwin, and I'm with RDA for You, former educator with Butte County ROP, and we are in agreement with OPS findings in terms of doing a task evaluation of some sort for potential RDAs. We would hope that a practical exam would continue, and it seems as if some of the obstacles that have been represented could be easily overcome if we had participation from educators, a full market survey, and getting other people involved. Hopefully continue on with the RDA practical or some form of task evaluation outside of the educational process.
And I'm Susie with Dental Specialties Institute, Susie Dalt, and I agree with the dental educator's request. I think that I deal more with on-the-job train, so I really think it's imperative that there is some kind of practical. We were talking about critical thinking and being able to process and produce. So I'm for that as well.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think we're back to calling the roll.
One more.
Oh, I'm sorry, one more comment. Yes, please. Sorry. It's on.
Oh, it's on. This question is for Sarah.
Excuse me, could you please identify yourself for the record?
I'm sorry. My name is Zania Delling with JNZ, Dental Rentals and Clinical Seminars. Sarah, I was just curious, how long will the process take once the urgency bill has been passed for the July 1st? How long will the process take for a clinical exam to come back once this all takes place? I know that the OPES recommended that a clinical exam be given. So when can we start working on that to bring that back?
I might need to defer to Heidi here, but from what my understanding is based on what the OPS recommendations of the alternatives are, the board would then take action. It would then be a process of identifying legislation to implement those procedures, and then also developing the examination content, criteria, essentially the entire administration of that examination, which to my knowledge, and Heidi, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's 1 to 2 years is what that process typically takes. And then depending on what the legislative process is at the time, that can also extend the process.
Yeah, it depends what option the board chooses. We are going to have options of the cost and the procedures to update, to revise the practical examination, in addition to other options that are not the same as having a practical examination. So depending on what option the board chooses, the time frame could vary.
I apologize, but I just don't understand why it takes so long. I don't understand that.
And Heidi, it's
the
a
only reason
process.
why I don't is because you've already evaluated it. We have come to a conclusion that there's three things wrong with it, correct? The grading, the grading criteria, the way that the graders were calibrated. There were 3 things, right?
There's multiple things.
Yeah. So I'm just I don't know how
Well,
come that can't be corrected.
Essentially, the practical exam as it existed prior to April 6th.
Right.
Will not continue.
No.
That exam will no longer continue. And so what OPS will be doing now is identifying alternatives to that examination. And once the board determines which one of those alternatives we're going to take, then we would have to develop what that alternative would look like and establish what those requirements are in statute and regulation, the development of the examiner handbooks, and how the examination would be administered, or whatever that option is. It may be an examination, I'm not sure. We haven't developed those options yet, but that process can take time to be able to do it accurately and correctly.
Okay, so if I may, I would like to propose to the board that there are a lot of educators out here right now, and we would love to have the opportunity to help this process along, because we feel like it's an urgent matter to come up with some type of clinical exam for public safety. So if we could be involved, we would be more than happy to help out with that process. Okay? Thank you.
Hello, my name is Lydia Cosio. I'm from Cerritos College. I'm an instructor representing myself and the other instructors at the college that we teach. And I just want to reinforce and reiterate that our feelings are the same as what has been spoken previously, that we feel clinical skills should be part of the evaluation process. And I just want that to go on record.
Thank you.
Melody Randolph, I don't know if it is an appropriate time since OPS is here, but we have a lot of questions about the dentist sign-off as an alternative. As far as, were dentists polled to ask if they even want to do that? How many dentists want to do the training? What are you going to do in specialty offices? So you have a specialty dentist, an assistant in an endo office. How are they going to get checked off on RDA duties that have nothing to do with endo? All of those issues are those things
Excuse
that are...
me.
Yes.
I think we're getting a little ahead of ourselves
Okay.
by discussing that. That item isn't really agendized for discussion. So I think we'll
But
ask you to...
that's part of the...
We'll ask you to hold that question if you could, please.
Just point of clarification, alternatives have not been developed yet and have not been presented to the board, so there aren't any alternatives on the table as of right now. So
But that was one of the things that the OPS had suggested as an alternative. It's in their analysis. Yes?
But we're beginning that process, so
Okay.
it's a little premature to discuss what the alternatives are going to be or
Okay.
what concerns we have. So we're initiating that process, and the subject matter experts will be working on the development of that. So there are no alternatives on the table as of this time.
Okay.
I'm going to ask now that public comment be limited to 2 minutes unless you have new information.
Actually, it's just a question, and it's definitely not 2 minutes. The question being is the RDA practical, I know that it needs to be worked on, but it is a done deal that it's gone as it is right now. Is there any way of just making it better and keeping it as the exam that we have, but making it better and correcting the problems that we have?
No, as it existed prior to April 6th, it's no longer in existence.
No.
That examination has been suspended. Whatever alternatives are determined, it will need to be established by OPS with the requirements.
No corrections that are allowed for the problems that exist.
That will be part of the process to determine those alternatives.
Thank you.
Okay. Any additional public comment? Again, new information, please.
Yes. I just wanted to know, I was at the ADA meeting, and they made an announcement that the American Dental Association was going to invest millions of dollars into looking into an OSCE type of clinical exam. And I'm just wondering if that's something that can be considered by OPS as an alternative, or is this too early for me to mention this?
I think that will be taken into consideration. Thank you. Okay, we have a motion on the floor. We're ready to vote. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. That losing track. We got a little out of order there. Okay, so let's move along to agenda item number 6.
So after the conclusion of the April 6th meeting, board staff met with Assembly BMP committee staff to explain the process of where we've been and where we've come to, and the suspension of the RDA practical examination, and that we had determined the need for urgency legislation to essentially push back the July 1st, 2017 date that's currently in statute to allow the board to continue licensing so as not to create a barrier to licensure, and then also allow the board the time to develop those alternatives. Board staff had been made aware that Assembly Bill 1732 had been designated as the vehicle for the board's language. And at the time the memo was written for the board meeting materials, it was still designated as a bill for Bureau of Real Estate. And amendments were just made at close of business on Thursday, May 4th, after the meeting materials had been mailed out. And so board staff is handing out the amended version, including all of the language that the board staff had requested relating to the suspension of the examination. And essentially, at this time, the board staff is requesting that the board and the Dental Assisting Council take a support position of Assembly Bill 1732 that would extend the suspension date to July 1st of 2020, or until the board determines an alternative way to measure competency, whichever occurs first. And just for clarification, the reason the July 1st of 2020 date was selected by staff was that aligns with the board sunset review dates as well.
So it's moved?
Yeah, did somebody move already?
It's been moved. Would you like to second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Burton and Morrow?
I'll wait in line.
Okay, thank you. Okay, board member discussion. Council member discussion. Public comment. Seeing none, I believe we're ready to vote.
Okay. Dr. Richer?
Yes.
Dr. Stewart?
Yes.
Fran Burton?
Yes.
Dr. Chan?
Yes.
Yvette Chappelle Ingram, yes. Judith Forsythe?
Yes.
Dr. Lai? Dr. Lay?
Yes.
Meredith McKenzie?
Yes.
Abigail Medina?
Yes.
And Dr. Morrow?
Yes.
Ann Contreras? Yes. Pamela Davis Washington?
Yes.
Tamara McNeely?
Yes.
Jennifer Rodriguez?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to item 7. Update regarding combining of the RDA law and ethics and written examinations.
Just a quick update for the board and the council. At the December 2016 meeting, the board and the council had taken action to combine the RDA written and the law and ethics examinations into one test administration. And so staff has been working with the Office of Professional Examination Services to implement that combined examination. They have been holding subject matter expert workshops. The last one was held at the beginning of February. And at this point, staff is aware that we're in process to have the combined test launched in May of 2018. And so I just wanted to share that with the board and the council today.
Okay. So that's an informational item.
I have a question.
Yes.
Thank you. Regarding the date, the launch date, when will the examination plan be available to the candidates?
OPS, do you?
I'm just asking for sufficient time for the changes, because right now we're working off the existing, and with those changes, we need...
We may need to get back to you on that, but we would ensure that there's sufficient time for the candidates to prepare.
Jennifer?
What is the number of questions, or has that been determined that that test will consist of?
That's still part of the development of
It's
the...
still, okay.
Okay. Public comment on this item? Seeing none, we'll move ahead. Item number 8. Update on 2017 Dental Assisting Council regulatory workshops.
Just another update. Unfortunately, staff had to cancel the April 7th workshop with the Dental Assistant Council to review the regulations that are in process. We're still on target to have the June 23rd, 2017 meeting, and we'll be scheduling another meeting sometime after. Board staff expects that the regulatory proposal will be brought to the board and the council at the it's the November meeting this year.
Very good. So that concludes our meeting of the Dental Assisting Council and the board. Could I ask for adjournment?
Before we do that.
Yes.
We did not take the next step to direct staff to send a letter on.
Oh, okay, yeah,
So
okay,
if we could, that could be a part of the record, please,
okay.
regarding legislation.
So we'll send a letter in support of,
Yes.
of the bill. Okay, thank you for that. Okay. So unless there's any comment on this item, I'll go ahead and close this. Now, we're going to take the next item out of order. We're going to move ahead with the Ledge Reg committee meeting, and then we will break for lunch. Upon conclusion of that meeting, we'll take about an hour and 15 minutes for lunch, and we'll resume with the Substance Use Awareness Committee meeting following lunch, okay? So if we could have the Ledge Reg Committee remain on the dais, and Ms. Burton will take over the meeting. Thank you.
Okay. I'm calling to order the Legislative and Regulatory Committee meeting. Item 2. If you would staff call the roll?
Okay. Ms. Burton?
Here.
Dr. Morrow?
Here.
Dr. Chan?
Here.
Ms. Medina?
Here.
Okay, quorum is established. Item 2 is approval of the September 23rd minutes.
Move approval as presented.
Move
Second.
Morrow,
Second.
second Chan. Any questions? Would you call the roll, please?
Ms. Burton?
Yes.
Dr. Morrow?
Yes.
Dr. Chan?
Yes.
Ms. Medina?
Abstain.
Item 3 is the tentative legislative calendar. I just want to point out 2 things within the coming week. And the first is May 12th, which is the last day for policy committees to hear and report non-fiscal bills. And the second item is May 19th, which is the last day for committees to meet prior to June 5th. Item 4 is the discussion and possible action on legislation.
Okay, so today, board staff has brought 3 bills before the committee for consideration. We have Assembly Bill 703, Assembly Bill 1277, and Senate Bill 27. All 3 bills are contained in the committee members' meeting materials. Board staff will, I'll go ahead and walk the committee through what's happening in these bills, but board staff is recommending that the committee take a watch position on all of these bills and that no action is necessary today. So the first bill, Assembly Bill 703, essentially provides a fee waiver for those licensed or applicants who are married to those who are in the armed forces of the United States and who hold a current active and unrestricted license in another state, and so that they essentially get a fee waiver for that application. And the board does not anticipate a significant impact as a result of this bill.
Any questions on that bill? Any questions from the public?
Assembly Bill 1277 has been authored by Assemblymember Daley, and this is, as I understand it, in response to the infection control water issues that were found in Orange County. This bill would require the board to amend its minimum standards for infection control regulations to require water and other methods used for irrigation to be sterile or contain recognized disinfecting or antibacterial properties when performing dental procedures that expose dental pulp. And this bill also gives the board the authority to promulgate emergency regulations.
I just have a comment regarding this bill. Not that I'm opposed to it, but I want to just point out to the members of the committee that currently our minimum standards for infection control that are in our Code of Regulations, section 1005, item B18 states that sterile coolants and irrigants shall be used for surgical procedures involving soft tissue or bone. Sterile coolants, irrigants must be delivered using a sterile delivery system. The pulp tissue of a tooth, whether it's a permanent tooth or a primary tooth, is soft tissue. It is connective tissue, the same as any other tissue, connective tissue in the body. And it is my opinion, and maybe our legal can help us out in this, in that this infection control guidelines already sets that standard that pulp tissue must be, when it is involved in treatment, it must be irrigated with sterile irrigating solutions delivered in a sterile system. Now, whether we're enforcing that or whether we're looking at that is a different issue, but pediatric dentist sitting to my right would, I'm sure, agree with me that doing a pulpotomy on a primary tooth, what the media referred to as a baby or a child root canal treatment, is involving surgery on soft tissue, and so therefore should be covered under this guideline.
And so, at the risk of putting council on the spot, since this is, as I understand it, a CDA bill, do you have a response to that?
Brianna Pittman with the California Dental Association. We did look at those infection control regulations when Assemblymember Daley had told us that he was looking into this issue, and we were looking into it as well, very concerned with the infections that happened in the clinic here, actually in Anaheim. Our read of that was that that regulation did not include pulpotomies, which is why we had worked with the assembly member on sort of focusing it to, bring that sort of quote unquote surgical standard to pulpotomies, because we agreed that that sort of was the right standard, and we felt that a more targeted approach to the particular procedure that had happened where the infections occurred was probably a more appropriate and targeted solution. And so we kind of talked with him about that, and that's what the language ended up in the bill, but we had read that as that it did not include pulpotomies in the IC regs.
Yes.
I'm not opposed to looking at the application of the existing statute on this, but it does seem redundant, so that's the first thing. The second thing is that what is the body of evidence that suggests that you have to identify pulpotomies separately from any other soft tissues? Are there a greater incidence of infections that have appeared in the literature from not using sterile water?
I don't know that we did a thorough, we talked with a lot of various experts in pediatric dentistry, endo, several academics, and sort of folks were suggesting that this was the right direction to go, and that this seemed appropriate, and that there were a lot of risks, especially on primary teeth, doing the pulpotomies, that you would create sort of this additional risk of infection, or put the potential for one, and that it would be a good idea to have a sort of a higher standard.
Right. Having opinion on this versus having evidence-based or literature-based is what we should be basing our judgment on, not just what experts are saying.
Can you talk more into the mic, please?
Okay, I'm sorry. I believe that we should base our advocacy or our support on this based on what's in the literature or what's based on research, evidence-based, not on just what someone is saying.
I mean, I think there are, you know, and we've talked with a number of folks on this, and I think there are some varying opinions. When we had looked at it, this was the, you know, I know that Assemblymember Daley really wanted to work on this issue and look at it, and this was a targeted approach that we thought really got at the particular problem that happened, and, you know, and he was really interested in moving that forward, which is why there's legislation now.
Dr. Morrow.
You know, I have a question that I don't know that can be answered at this point in time, but in our investigation of the incident that occurred, or the incidents that occurred in the pediatric clinic in Orange County, did our investigation reveal what irrigants were used in the process of the pulpotomy on the children that subsequently developed an infection and required either treatment or hospitalization? Was the infection control standard stating that surgery on soft tissue required sterile irrigants or
Morrow.
not? I mean, that's a question that I
Dr.
don't
Morrow,
know.
sorry, that investigation is still pending, and so
Right,
should
okay,
not be discussed.
So we're still looking at that. But I've had a number of questions and calls from endodontists that are saying, does this bill mean that they have to use a sterile irrigant when they are doing a pulpectomy rather than a pulpotomy? We're getting into definitions, and those can be critical, because a pulpotomy is the partial removal of the pulp, but retaining a certain level of that pulp tissue, where a pulpectomy is total removal of the pulp tissue. Both of them are surgical procedures on soft tissue. So where do we go with the definition of pulpotomy, pulpectomy, so forth? If you're wanting to limit it to primary teeth, then say so.
Paul Rigiardo with the California Society of Pediatric Dentistry. That with the American Academy of Pediatric Dentistry, we have done some looking into this, and without being a definitive answer to Dr. Chan's question, there are no, to my knowledge, definitive type of studies that have compared either pulpotomy procedures to other procedures, comparing pulp procedures to other soft tissue procedures that would be evidence-based and blinded in some manner to produce the answer to the question that you raised. And in the absence of that, looking at these procedures, the same water lines and the same irrigants were being used at the clinic, to the best of our knowledge, with all soft tissue procedures, but the problems were only occurring with these pulp procedures. And addressing the fact that there were over 70 cases that have required significant surgical and antibiotic therapy, the bill was directed toward those things. And in that manner, it's focusing on something's going on that the existing legislation either didn't cover, the 10.1005, or it is not and was not being enforced.
At this time, staff is recommending a watch position.
I just have two quick comments. One is about the existing regulation under Section 1005B18. I know there was a question whether or not what procedures would be covered, but it would be my analysis that so long as it meets the definition of a surgical procedure involving soft tissue or bone, then that's when you have to use sterile coolants or irrigants. So it's pretty broad in our regulations. So as long as those procedures are covered under what I just read, then it would be my analysis that it's covered under that. And so the second point I wanted to bring out that was separate from that is there is, in the current bill under 1277, there's that portion about we wouldn't have to show if we did emergency regulations to the Office of Administrative Law. But the way it's written, it would only pertain to amending our infection control guidelines, specific only to the water irrigation. So this is more for staff and for everyone to know that if we tried to do a comprehensive package to do other changes to our infection control guidelines, that wouldn't be covered under the emergency reg section. It's pretty specific in the bill that it only pertains, that kind of exemption from showing facts to show that it is an emergency according to OAL, that's only specific to the water irrigation. So that's just another comment for that. Thanks.
Any other comments?
Well, I'm just trying to think this thing through real quickly. If this bill is, 1277 is simply changing our regulations to meet the requirement for irrigation to be sterile or contain recognized disinfecting solutions, the regulation is already there in our guidelines for infection control is already there. So are we going to amend something that's already there? I don't know. That's just my concern.
Well, what I see from this bill is that it allows the key component I see from a legal's perspective is the part about not having to show the facts that it's an emergency. That basically we'll be able to put this through as emergency regs, because then it's more than just what's currently in our infection control guidelines, because the board could do more. They could require additional testing or showing, or we could do what limits do you want to set. So that's where this comes into giving the board more flexibility and being able to promulgate regulations quicker than through the normal channels.
Okay, thanks. Well, with that said, I recommend, I move that we vote a support position on the bill.
It is staff's position and it is mine that we not take a position on any of these bills at this point.
I can live with that.
Thank you. And you had a question?
No, I'll pass it.
Okay. Seeing nothing further on that one, then let's move to agenda item 4C.
So Senate Bill 27. Senate Bill 27 allows for a fee waiver for applicants that qualify as veterans who have served as active duty members of the California National Guard or the U.S. Armed Forces. Board staff recommends a watch position on this bill. Board staff is under the impression that this will not have a significant impact on the program.
Are there any questions? Any public comment? So seeing none, I just want to restate that the three bills that we looked at this time, we are not taking a position on them. And we will move with that and into agenda item 5, update on pending regulatory packages.
I'm going to try to make this brief. Prior to the February board meeting, the board lost our legislative and regulatory analyst, was actually hired at another DCA office. And so we've been without a legislative and regulatory analyst for the last several months, and I'm in the process of hiring and filling that position. It's my hope that in the next few months we're going to be able to knock out several of these regulatory packages and finally move forward on the continuing education requirements and the basic life support equivalency standards, as well as the interim therapeutic restoration requirements, and then the elective facial cosmetic surgery permit application requirements and the institutional standards. The board did receive back the definitions of discovering and filing regulatory package and the final rulemaking for the fee increase. And those were submitted to the Office of Administrative Law at the beginning of April. We did hear back from an attorney at OAL that there were some concerns relating to our fee increase package, just some technical amendments that need to be made, and so those will be taken under consideration by the board at tomorrow's meeting. Other than that, we do have the licensure by credential application requirements, which I'm hoping we'll be able to bring forward at the August meeting as well. So moving forward, I'm hoping that we're going to be able to crank out these regulatory packages in a timely manner.
Any questions on this item? Any public comment? Agenda item 6 is something that is a standard part of the Legend Regulatory Committee meeting, and that is an opportunity to allow stakeholders to submit proposals in writing to the board before the meeting for possible consideration at future board meetings of prospective legislative proposals. And there is no action requested on that item or required on that item unless there is other board member comment or public comment. I think we're finished. So we're adjourned.
Thank you.
Okay, at this point, we're going to go into recess until 1:45. We'd like to start promptly back here at that time, and we will begin with the Substance Use Awareness Committee meeting then. Thank you. Abuse Awareness Committee meeting, chaired by Dr. Stewart.
Okay, I'm going to call to order the Substance Use Awareness Committee for the Dental Board of California. And let's do the roll call. I think I'm doing that one. Thomas Stewart, yes. How is the volume back there? Can you hear? It's good. Dr. Bruce Witcher?
Present.
Yvette Chappell Ingram?
Here.
Thank you. We have a quorum. You had a chance to read the minutes. I'll accept an approval of the December 1, 2016 Prescription Drug Abuse Committee meeting minutes.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Oh, roll call, sorry. Thomas Stewart, yes. Aye. Bruce Witcher?
Yes.
Yvette Chappell Ingram?
Yes.
Thank you. Chief Enforcement Officer Carlos Alvarez is at the dais to help us get through this meeting. And Carlos, thank you for your support on this program and for your help today. Let's move to agenda item 3, Diversion Program Report and Statistics.
Good afternoon. Carlos Alvarez, Enforcement Chief. So I'm here to give a background and an update on the Diversion Program Report and Statistics. So the Diversion Evaluation Committee, also known as DEC, program statistics for the quarter ending March 31st of 2017 are provided below. And these statistics reflect the participant activity in the Diversion Recovery Program and that are presented for information purposes only. And these statistics are derived from the Maximus monthly reports. So for January and February self-referrals, we didn't have any for those 2 months. For March, we had 1. And for enforcement referrals, we didn't have any for those 3 months. Probation referrals, we only had one for the month of February. And closed cases for January, we had 2. And closed cases, we had 1 in February, 1 in March. And active participants, currently we have January we had 20, February and March we have 19. And also at this time, the board is currently recruiting for public members position for the northern deck, 2 dentist positions and 1 physician position on the southern deck, and dental auxiliary positions on both the northern and southern decks. And the next scheduled meeting is for June 1st of 2017 in Northern California.
Thank you, Carlos. This is information only, but do we ask if there are any questions or concerns from the board members? Seeing none, we don't need to do public comment this time. Seeing none, okay, Carlos.
Okay. And we'll move into item number 4, and the Substance Use Awareness Committee agenda. So update regarding the operative date for implementation of the Senate Bill 482, Laura, Chapter 708, Statute of 2016, relating to the Controlled Substance Utilization Review and Evaluation System. So what it is the Senate Bill, Chapter 708, Statute of 2016 requires that a healthcare practitioner authorized to prescribe, order, administer, or furnish a controlled substance to consult the Cures database to review a patient's controlled substance history no earlier than 24 hours or the previous business day before prescribing a Schedule 2, Schedule 3, or Schedule 4 controlled substance for the first time with the patient. But there's also some exceptions with this. If somebody is receiving hospice care, they're exempt from this database. And also for the bill provides a healthcare practitioner who fails to consult the Cures database is required to be referred to the appropriate state professional licensing board solely for administrative sanctions. And also the bill also makes the above mentioned provisions operative 6 months after the Department of Justice certifies that the Cures database is ready for statewide usage. However, they haven't hired enough staff for the Cures data system, so at this time there's no time frame when this Cures database is going to be implemented.
Thank you, Carlos. Questions, comments from the board? Subcommittee? Seeing none, public comments? Okay, let's move on.
Now present item number 5, and it's the update regarding the Controlled Substance Utilization Review and Evaluation System, registration and usage statistics for information only, and this was compromised by Department of Consumer Affairs. And what it covers is the registration and usage status for prescribers and for dispensers. And so it gives us like the total number of prescribers and dispensers that have used the system, that have registered with Cures. And for prescribers, for February, we had 127,085. Then March, it was 127,676, and April, it was 128. And so then it breaks it down by doctor license type. And if we go down to doctors of dental surgery, dental medicine, so currently right now, February, when they registered was 7,435. Then March, it was 755. And then in April, it was 7,704. So actually, it has been going up. Then the other models that came in were law enforcement agencies, and that's including the dental board with the sworn investigators, and also it covers regulatory board, so it covers the dental board with law enforcement and part of the regulatory board. So with law enforcement, it was 1,160 for February. Then March, it was 1,169, and April was 1,173. And for the regulatory boards, it was 72 in February, March, it went up by 173, and they kept status quo for April at 73, and this for registration with cures. Then with the number of, it says right here, PARs ran, and what that is a patient activity report. And so this shows that how many prescribers or dispensers, law enforcement agencies, doctors, dental medicine have ran a report prior to prescribing substance schedules 2, 3, or 4. And so for doctors of dental surgery, dental medicine, for February was 1,180, and for March it was 1,992, and April was 1,187. And as far as regulatory boards of running a patient activity report, and with that activity report, it shows what the patient has been prescribed, how much substance has been described, and the time frames that's been described, and that's what this report is. So with regulatory boards, it was used 1,552. Then in March, it was 835, and in April, it was 911. Then if we move to the next page, it will show how many times the system was accessed. And this was between January 15, 2017 through April 15, 2017. And so for doctors, dental surgeries, dental medicine, it was accessed 1,235 times in February. In March, it was 1,238. And in April, it was used 1,579. Then for regulatory boards, it was accessed 373 times in February, 279 in March, and in April it was 354. Now it also documents how many times the help desk was contacted for cures. And so for dental surgery, dental medicine, the help desk was contacted 69 times in January, 90 in February, and 83 times in March. And for regulatory boards, it was contacted 5 times in January, and February, March, we didn't have any contacts listed. And those are and so that's the reports for cures on the access.
Thank you, Carlos. Any comments, questions from the subcommittee?
Yeah, I have a comment. It's interesting, we have 38,000 dentists and yet 7,404 who have registered with cures. So I asked Karen Fisher if we could figure out how many of our dentists have DEA registrations, and we're not able to determine that. I mean, we might want to go back to DEA and ask us if they could help us with that number to see if the people who have DEAs are in fact registering. I assume they are. That's about 20% of our licensees, so it may be those are the ones that are doing the prescribing. It'd be good to know that. The other thing is, of the registrants, only about 16% of them have ever accessed the program. So even though they're registered, they're not using it. But again, it's not fully implemented. So it would just be interesting to see how that number changes going forward, whether, you know, when it becomes official, it's in effect, everybody's got to check it. I would expect that number to go up quite a bit, even though there are some limitations. In other words, it's only if you're prescribing more than a 5-day supply. And so, you know, I think most of our licensees are probably within that, or maybe one refill. So it's just an interesting statistic, which, you know, I wanted us to take a look at. So thanks for getting that.
And a question for Sarah. Sarah, do you think that we can get that information? Do you think we can have staff try to get that information for us in terms of the DEA?
I made a note of it, so we'll go back and look into that.
Thank you. Further comments from the subcommittee? Seeing none. Public members? Okay, Carlos?
Okay. And we'll move into item number 6, and with this is an update regarding the statewide prescription opiate misuse and overdose prevention work group meeting that was held on April 26th of this year. I'll give a background. On April 26, 2017, the statewide prescription opiate misuse and overdose prevention work group met to update and share information regarding the efforts to address the opiate epidemic affecting Californians. So last month on April 27th, the Center of Disease Control and Prevention released a new online training for healthcare providers. The training features the recommendations and the guidelines for prescribing opiates for chronic pain. It provides samples, scenarios, feedbacks, and resources. The training is intended to help and assist healthcare providers with communicating effectively with patients about opiate use, deciding when to initiate or continue opiate therapy, offering appropriate non-opiate options for pain management, and access and addressing the risk and harms of opiate use. Also covered on there was on April 19th, 2017, the Associated Press published that the federal government will provide states nearly $500 million for prevention and treatment programs aimed at confronting the opiate epidemic. The grant is to help the healthcare professionals in training, technology, and support for prescription drug monitoring programs that aim to prevent abuse and to assist patients who may need help. But at this time, the funds haven't been released by the government at this time. And also on November 8th through the 9th, 2017 in San Diego, there will be a California Opiate Policy Summit, getting to zero overdose deaths through a collective impact. Topics will include enforcement, trends and effective strategies, discipline and regional background sessions, and parent coalition convening. One may register for the summit online by visiting San Diego rxabusetaskforce.org. I apologize for that. And so the next scheduled statewide prescription abuse and misuse overdose prevention work group meeting will be held on Wednesday, June 28th, 2017.
Thank you, Carlos. Questions from the board?
Will we have somebody be attending the June 28th?
We've talked about that, and I think myself and Carlos will be attempting to put in for that one. Okay. We're moving on to item 7. And I've asked Dr. Witcher to comment. He has a nice summary in item number 7, and we have some action goals. Before we do that, though, I want to take the time to say and congratulate and say thank you to the California Dental Association for the great job they've done in promoting the courses at our CDA Presents. I was able to attend the meeting last week with Drs. Bundy and Park, and they had a room full of dentists, and those gentlemen are doing a fabulous job of getting the word out and doing it in a professional and a very caring manner. So those two folks are just tremendous spokespeople for California and for this issue. And I just want to acknowledge California Dental Association for pushing that and helping us in that regard. Dr. Witcher?
Okay. This is item number 7, discussion and possible action to establish goals for raising awareness in the California dental profession on opioid use and abuse among patients. There's some background information here. I'm not going to go through this because the information is available, and Carlos covered some of it in his report. So I'm going to skip down to page 2, paragraph 5. And this has to do with what the role of dentistry is in prescribing and prescription drug issues. And just to read from my summary, although dentists may be in a unique position to screen for substance abuse and counsel patients, this does not appear to be part of routine dental practice. And this comes out of some surveys that were published in the literature of dentist prescribing patterns, mainly in the Southeast. And they ran some practice-based research network studies of prescribing patterns. There were some that came out of FQHCs. There were some that were done in private practices in South Carolina. There's a research group out of Florida that's very active in doing this. It's run by a PhD psychologist, Jennifer McCauley. And there's a number of papers that she's written on this, and I had some correspondence with her on this topic. The recent survey sort of indicated that although they had limited sample size, only a minority of dentists screened for prescription drug abuse. Most indicated they don't feel this is a problem in their practice. Although the majority of dentists who respond indicate they've received limited training, most indicated they were interested in receiving additional training. So there's sort of a willingness to pick this up, but maybe a lack of education. And then regarding risk mitigation strategies, most dentists believe that patients already had the information, it wasn't necessary for short-term prescriptions, and that pharmacists would provide the information. However, if they had prior training and use of the PDMP, they were significantly more likely to have accessed it. And so, again, I think we're looking at maybe a select population who have DEAs, who actually utilize the PDMP. It'll be interesting to see how the DEA registrations correspond with the cures, because that may be why this data is skewed. We just don't know. We don't really know a lot about prescribing patterns. And it is regional, too. There's some maps that show how this problem is distributed across the country. It's much more prevalent in the southeast and parts of the northeast, not so much so in California. Obviously, it exists here. So it's just, there's a lot we don't know, and I think we need to get more information. So although some states have conducted surveys of dentists' understanding of addiction medicine, we're not aware that a survey like this has been done in California, and the DOJ website indicates that there is a database of prescriber information, which we just reviewed here, and they've provided that to us. In other words, the information that is referenced here is what Carlos just reviewed in terms of the distribution of prescribers within California by profession. And at our last meeting, the board unanimously approved the committee recommendation to establish a communication plan relating to opioid abuse and misuse, which included a web page. And that will address that in a subsequent agenda item that Dr. Stewart has. But the action here that we would like to take is the committee wishes to recommend the board adopt a policy statement recognizing the epidemic of opioid use and abuse within the country, and to encourage the dental profession to acknowledge the epidemic and to actively participate in finding solutions to this challenge. So I think Dr. Stewart prepared something on this for us to consider.
And this is certainly a first draft, and we can have staff help us if we think it needs to be strengthened, which it may. And here it is. The board recognizes the opioid use and abuse epidemic nationally and believes the dental profession in California should be involved in a solution.
Okay, any board member comments on that?
That is is that it? We're making that.
That's the starting point. You
That's
need a
our
policy
starting point.
statement. You kind of need a policy statement to lay out what we're going to do underneath that. But the fact that we haven't had one in place and now we will is a beginning point.
I think that's a great idea.
Okay, well, maybe the way we want to proceed is to direct staff to work with the committee to do further development on that agenda item.
Perfect. Yep.
And then bring it back for finalization, maybe at a meeting, and
Okay.
maybe flesh it out a little bit more.
Sure.
Great idea.
Okay, so I guess I'll make a motion then that we direct staff to work with the committee to further develop the policy statement on opioid use and abuse, and to bring that back for a future meeting for approval by the committee and then the board.
And I second.
Okay? Your chair, so.
So do we need roll call? Dr. Stewart, yes?
Should we take some public comment? Is there
Oh, I'm sorry.
any
Yes.
public comment on that agenda item?
Thank you.
Yeah, Tony Lum with the Dental Hygiene Committee. I was just curious, since cannabis has been legalized in California, is there going to be similar goals for that as well in the future?
This discussion is limited to
Opioids?
issues.
Okay.
And we should probably think about agendizing that for a future meeting, because that is another issue which is certainly prevalent.
Okay, thank you.
Any other public comments? Seeing none? Myself, yes. Dr. Witcher?
Yes.
Yvette Chappelle Ingram?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, the next action requested is the committee may wish to consider conducting a survey prescribing practices and addiction management awareness of licensees in California, similar to previous surveys conducted in other states. Based on responses to the survey, the committee may wish to outline goals to address issues identified through the survey. Basically, I had correspondence with one of the authors of the other surveys, and they're going to do some more national surveys, and they've refined their survey instrument a little bit. I have something that we could put out as a survey monkey, or maybe have staff come up with a vehicle just to kind of get us started and see where people are. And so I thought that would be something that we could be working on. It might not produce, a really in-depth source of information, but it would be something that we could be looking at and maybe expand that out as needed. So I was going to ask if the committee would like to direct staff to work with the subcommittee or the committee to develop a survey for circulation among our licensees.
Sarah, I'd love to hear your comments. We have the resource to ask staff to work on that issue. And
Yes, we can, I think utilizing what Dr. Witcher has as a starting point would be helpful, and then we can assess where we are and report back at the August meeting. But I think that would be at least a good starting point.
Okay, I'll move that item then.
is there a second?
Second, Yvette.
Public comment? Okay, I guess we're good to go.
All right, Dr. Stewart, yes. Dr. Witcher?
Yes.
Yvette Chappelle?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Witcher. So moving on to item 8. I just, information only really is just listing some of the potential resource links that are going to go on our website, and some of these we're still in a working stage of trying to figure out if they're the most important links, but we think we have a starting place, and it's just real apparent to me that when you go to these courses and Drs. Bundy and Park are presenting, and you listen to the comments coming from the dentists in the room, many of them are I don't know, they just seem to be focused on this is another government intrusion into their practice lives and into their personal worlds, and yet I didn't hear much concern about the actual issue of opioid misuse. So I think that we have some awareness, we have some education to lay out, and I think that utilizing the communication plan, utilizing our website, our webpage, will be a very important step moving forward in the future, and I think that that's something that I'd like to see promoted sooner rather than later, and I'll take any comments from the committee at this point.
Do we have the capacity, does staff have the capacity to put this, to maintain this website with the resources?
If I may, as it relates to the website, I would venture to say that it would be important to have a policy statement kind of as a starting point before we launch a website with resources, so that we had a clear direction of where we were intending to go and what kind of resources we were planning on including in our board website, so that we could maintain it. So I would ask that perhaps the committee consider waiting until the policy statement's further developed to initiate the website, but once that is initiated, then it shouldn't be a problem to get that information up and going.
Excellent. Any further comments? I think we're moving in a good direction. And public comments?
Mary McKeon with CDA. I just wanted to mention we worked with some of the members of the committee to help develop, and CDA itself has also created a website on opioid abuse and prescriptions, and it's actually listed on this agendized item. I also just wanted to mention that we have received permission for the dental board to actually use the PowerPoint presentation by Drs. Bundy and Park, so we can provide you with documentation if needed, but I did want to relay that information to you.
Thank you.
Any further comment? Thank you, Carlos, for your help, and Sarah. Subcommittee, thank you. So I think, seeing no further comment, I believe we're adjourned.
Okay, the next item of business is going to be Anesthesia Committee. If we could have the members come up.
Are we on? Yes, we are. I want to call to order the Anesthesia Committee meeting. First, we will have a roll call to establish a quorum. Fran Burton?
Here.
Steve Chan?
Here.
Ross Lai?
Here.
Hong Lei?
Here.
Meredith McKenzie?
Here.
And Bruce Witcher.
Here.
Okay, thank you very much. First item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from our February 23 meeting.
I'm sorry, do we have to move it first before we can talk about it?
You mean
Minutes.
yeah. Yes, make a motion to approve, and then if you have any comments, any discussion, you could make it after that.
Going to make a motion to move.
So moved, a second?
Second.
Okay, it's moved and seconded. Any comments?
Comment. Page 2 of 5, about 2/3 on the way down, where it says Chair Morrow, with all due respect to the chair, I believe I was the one that made that comment, that Senator Pan talked about how problem-solving, instead of PEACEMAILED, was supposed to be piecemeal, PIECEMEAL, as testimony was coming forward. In constructing good policy, we should think of models first and then do implementation based on these models.
Okay. Thank you for that correction. Any other comments?
Apologies to the chair.
That's okay. I
Yes.
have no problem. Yes.
On page 5 of 5, the issue about tobacco tax, it should read, the last sentence should read on how that money can be spent, rather than that money can spend. And if I could please, this is a different format, and I'm not loving it. So if I could be on record as saying that this is not the most efficient way of doing minutes.
Sure, you can comment that. That comment is received. How would you like to see them done?
The way we were doing them before was perfectly in order, you know, rather than having, it seems like this is a lot of work to extract out each question and each answer instead of doing a summary. So
you more like a summary of
Right.
the discussion or the events rather
Right.
than a line-by-line item?
Right.
Okay,
Right.
that's
I'll-
taken.
I'll work with staff to go back to the original format.
Any other comments? Any other discussion? Any comments from the members of the public in attendance? Okay, we'll call the, yes.
Alan Felsenfeld, CDA, on page 405, about midway through the big board question paragraph, I don't think it's contra sedation, I think it's conscious sedation, as a correction to the minutes.
Yes, well
See
taken.
that, sir? Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, we'll call the vote. Would you call roll, please? Could we call the roll for the vote? Oh, I have them? I'm sorry. See, I'm trying to get you to do my job, huh? No harm in trying. Okay. Fran Burton,
Yes.
Steve Chan,
Yes.
Ross Lai,
Yes.
Hong Lei,
Yes.
Meredith McKenzie,
Epstein.
I'm sorry?
Abstain.
Abstain, okay. And Stephen Morrow, aye. Okay. Has been approved. Thank you very much. And now we will, I get too many papers here, don't I? Okay. Next item on the agenda will be, if I can find my agenda. Here we go. Discussion and possible action regarding a courtesy reporting form for the deaths and hospitalization of patients who received anesthesia in compliance of Business and Professions Code, Section 1680. Do we have any comments or suggestions from the board members after having had the opportunity to read and review this draft document? Any suggestions or comments?
Well, I mean, it's fairly straightforward. It's just a recitation and form of, what's in AB 2235. And it's a starting point. And again, this is, as I understand it, this is just deaths or hospitalizations related to sedation. So there may be others that were related to dental treatment, not related to sedation, that would not use this form necessarily.
Right.
So I think that might just need to be clarified because, I mean, other people could fill this out, but they might have trouble with it. There's a lot of information that might not be relevant. For instance, somebody has an MI in the waiting room or the parking lot or something like that.
Okay, well taken.
Top of the form says courtesy reporting of death or hospitalization.
Well, I think the bill was more specific than that, so.
Yeah, I think the purpose of, I think it would be best to identify it as Dr. Witcher states, that it is for sedation anesthesia, not just for death or hospitalization.
I can take that back and we can make that clarification.
Okay. Any other comments, questions from committee members? Yes. Oh, you're not a committee member, but go for it.
One of the things that I noted here, until this form is implemented into regulation, this is just a suggestion, right? Okay, that's why we say courtesy, because that's not entirely clear. I've seen it before where other boards, we've tried to put that, but it didn't work. So we just kind of took out the word courtesy and made it more clear that it's a suggested form.
A recommended form?
Yeah, a recommended form. And going with that, I would remove at the end of the form on page 3, the certification or penalty of perjury until you actually get that into the regulation.
Okay.
Because it's a suggested form, I don't think people should be there just yet. That was it.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from the board? I have a few suggestions to make regarding the form. Part 2, where it says name, contact, and license information. I'm not clear for sure that that should be the dentist's name. Should we identify whose name that should be? Also, on number 5, under Part 2, we have California license number. Suggest possibly adding sedation or GA permit number as well. On part number 3.
I'm sorry, say that again, the last
The,
one.
the sedation or general anesthesia permit number.
Under number 5.
Yeah, under number 5. Well, it would be number 6 or 5.5,
Okay.
whatever. Also in part 3, patient information, I would suggest that an important documentation might be the patient's body mass index, which is generally a calculation of the body mass, which is, I think, important from a standpoint of dosage and medication dosages and effects of those medications. Under number 4 on page 2, I would request that the word sex be changed to gender. And at number 6, I suggest that the patient's primary dental diagnosis. Number 7, my suggestion is that the patient's coexisting diseases and/or conditions rather than diagnosis.
Diseases and/or conditions?
Yes, diseases or conditions, and/or conditions, right. And number 8, I would suggest that we identify dental procedures performed. Where we have, on number 9, where we have, and throughout the document, where we have the term sedation, I suggest that we consider sedation / anesthesia. And setting is a little unclear to me. Location administered. And maybe I'm wordsmithing, but medications administered rather than used. Administer medications. There's another, I would like to be consistent in where monitoring equipment is used. I would rather see utilized, because later on we also have the word utilized rather than used. So I think it should be consistent. On number 12, I suggest we adding the word permit category of the provider responsible for sedation / anesthesia oversight. 13, category of the provider delivering sedation / anesthesia. Wherever there's sedation, I would just add the / anesthesia, since we have permits for sedation and for anesthesia both. On number 17, again, sedation / anesthesia. Same thing on 20. Also on 20, or in that area on the form, suggests that we identify that the time that EMS was called and also the time that EMS arrived. As an addition to this list, I would like to consider adding emergency resuscitation equipment utilized. That's good. Also, I would like to see emergency medications administered, if any. And I would also like to suggest that we have a brief narrative of the events that took place. Any additional comments or questions from members of the committee? Yes.
Just for clarification, on item 10, is it your intent to have medications administered and quantity? Or dosage?
That would be good. In
For more
addition.
specificity.
You're right. Mhm. Now, I don't want to make the form onerous, but I wanted to have the information that we're needing not only meets the requirement of the statute, but our information that we collect is not limited to just what the bill calls for. It's also information that we would like to have, that we would like to use in our documentation. Okay. Yeah, I'll open it up to comments from members of the public in attendance. Any comments or questions?
Brianna Pittman, CDA. Just a couple of questions on whether this will be clarified when this form needs to be used and sort of exactly when. I know that the initial reporting was sort of any death or hospitalization, and this form is very specific to anesthesia. So just wanting to make sure that that's clear, both when the form needs to be used and then who fills it out. My understanding is that in the past there have been incidences where there were reports, but they came from multiple people because there were multiple people in the room for the treating dentist as well as the anesthesia provider. And so just sort of clarifying who's filling it out and making sure that the form acknowledges that if, multiple people might be filling it out for the same incidents, that you're making it so that they can fill out each of those things. I guess the other question or this raises for me, there's very specific in the statute what needs to be in the reporting form. I know that was a concern that CDA had last year during the legislative discussion around AB 2235, and we had asked for it to be a little more broad to provide that authority to sort of make sure that it was appropriate. But just want to recognize, and I guess the question would be is where is the line on exactly what needs to be in the form matching up with what's in the statute, and is there flexibility? And would be interested to know if if there's a determination that something would be better, more appropriately written in the form than how it's written in statute, if changes need to be made there.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions?
A couple of comments, if
Yes.
I may, sorry. First of all, you've got to remember when the board gets a form, first thing they do is request the records. So we may get additional information when that occurs. And then we'll get even more when we do the investigation, which will ultimately follow in the majority of cases. Some level of investigation will be done. The other thing is that Brianna Pittman's question about how, what are we limited to in terms of what's in the statute and what we do in regulation. I think that'll be addressed as we go through rulemaking because of the regulatory standards that would have to be met. There has to be consistency, authority, clarity, necessity, all those things. And so I think our counsel will help us with that.
Yeah, I think that'll work itself out as we go through the process.
Right.
Okay. Yes.
Just a point of information. The code, according to this, is if there's a death or discovery of a death, if it's related to dental or dental hygiene procedure, what happens on the occasion where it's not immediate and you have no knowledge that the patient went to the hospital, and whether or not you are unclear whether or not it's related to a dental procedure that the patient expired? Does that still come under this?
Yeah, and that was going to be my question, because I think that you may have to change or modify the heading of this form, because otherwise it could be very confusing. Okay, because this form is the courtesy reporting for death and hospitalization that is related to oral conscious sedation, general anesthesia, and all that. So I don't want it to be confused with the other reporting that's not related to conscious sedation procedures.
Through the chair.
Yes.
We noted that, that was my point, that we had to make it clear that there would be information added. On your second point about if you discover something later on, I think, isn't it within 7 days of discovery?
Right, I think the statute says you need to report it within 7 days of discovery of it occurring. So if you don't know that it happened, how can you report it? I mean, if it didn't happen in your office and you had to call EMS and transport, unless you're notified of it, how are you going to know? So I think the statute says the report is within 7 days of your knowing, of becoming aware of hospitalization or death or hospitalization.
Right, and isn't that what the introductory paragraph on the form also said?
I thought so.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah, I mean, it's not an unusual thing to, somebody doesn't show up for an appointment, you call, you find out, oh, he passed away. You know, well, usually it wasn't due to dental treatment, so you wouldn't have to report it.
So you wouldn't be
but,
reporting it.
you know,
No, and
we need
also-
to maybe look back and see what treatment was done. at
Again,
when.
just as an example, you know, unfortunately, an occurrence in my office was that a patient waiting in the, I mean, a person waiting in the waiting room for somebody who was being treated had a heart attack, and we had to transport them to the hospital. That wouldn't fall under the required to me report it, so, even though it happened in your office, it wasn't a patient. So. Yes.
Well, according to that section on B, there's a conditional on the, it says, is related to a dental or dental hygiene procedure.
Right.
That's the condition of the discovery. Suppose the discovery is that the person was hospitalized, expired, but there's no link to it that you have knowledge of. Is that still part of this? Because it's a condition.
Well, but my understanding is that this report is only submitted when it is involved with sedation or anesthesia,
Yes.
Okay, okay,
not for other reasons.
okay.
Okay.
That needs to be clarified.
Everybody okay? All right. I don't think there's any action required here. This is just a draft. We're still in the development of this form. Okay. Okay, moving on to agenda item number 4. We have a very good pass rate on our evaluations, general anesthesia evaluations, 191 have passed in the last 2 years, basically, and that's good. Only one failed evaluation. Unfortunately, the total is 0, but there's a 1 in March of 2017, so I think that should be corrected. So we also have reports for moderate sedation, which we now call conscious sedation, which is obviously being changed to moderate, and also medical general anesthesia. Any comments or questions regarding that report? Any comments or questions from the public in attendance?
If I could offer, we saw this report last meeting, so I probably already said this, but the total number of evaluations across the board is up, the exception being physician anesthesiology.
Right.
And so obviously our staff has been hard at work getting these things scheduled, getting them done. We're pretty current on GA evaluations. Conscious sedation has always been difficult to recruit evaluators for that group. Medical anesthesia evaluations are difficult because you have to have both a double degree and a physician, or some combination thereof. And it's very hard to schedule these folks because they move around a lot and they don't ever really land in one place.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's not a lot of them, so the numbers are small, but still it'd be nice to catch up there eventually.
Okay. Yes.
I want to compliment the staff on providing the graphical information, but I'm not a statistician. I don't know what I'm looking at, but this looks like a 12-month rolling average. And would there be more valid metrics by looking not only year-to-date, but comparison with prior years to see if there's changes? Again, I'm asking the question. I don't know what they, go ahead.
Through the chair. I can provide that information if you'd like to have it.
This is actually a 2-year.
It's
It
rolling.
goes from, yeah, rolling by month for 2 years.
Right.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay. Any other comments or questions on this item? Okay, moving forward. Agenda item number 5. Okay. Discussion and possible action on legislation, and I believe that Fran was going to lead out in this agenda item. Okay, Fran?
Okay. We are looking at 3 bills, AB 224 Thurman, SB 392, and SB 501. And before we begin this discussion, because you will see bills that, in some cases, have been amended several times and are still works in progress, and for which there's been no discussion with dental board staff. My recommendation on the 3 boards is that we not take a position at this time. There will be time later on. I understand the anxiety of some to get a position, but it's always been my point that you don't want to, it's hard to dial things back. And so you don't want to put yourself out there on something that you're not certain of. So with that, we will start with AB 224, and Sarah Wallace is going to give that presentation.
So board staff has included copies of the bills in the board members' meeting materials, but there was not an analysis included. I'm sure you've all had an opportunity to read through the bills. Essentially, this bill authored by Assemblymember Thurmond is attempting to take the board's recommendations from the December meeting and implement it into statute. This bill would change the definitions for deep sedation and general anesthesia, change the requirements for those who are going to be permitted for a GA permit for the different age ranges, also changes the anesthesia model, requires a report to be done by the board. It also changes the model for conscious sedation to become moderate sedation, and then oral conscious sedation would then become minimal sedation. So board staff has not been contacted by the author's office. We have been in contact with the Department of Consumer Affairs, just outlining some of staff's questions relating to the implementation. And so I wanted to bring forward to the committee today that while staff recommends that a watch position be taken, I think we have the opportunity to perhaps write a letter to the author's office or to the future committees just seeking clarification on how some of these provisions are intended to be implemented. So first off, in the board's recommendations that were made in December, one of the caveats at the end of the recommendation letter included potentially studying the effects of the recommendation prior to implementation of anything. And so what this bill does is it simultaneously requires the report and then also implements the changes that the board had recommended. So as it relates to the report, this bill requires a report to be completed by January 1st of 2019. And that we are required to contract with a nonprofit research organization for the purpose of obtaining high-quality data about outcomes and complications related to pediatric dental sedation and anesthesia. So just implementation-wise, timeline-wise, if this bill is signed, then it won't become effective until January 1st of 2018. The contracting process at the state can be very cumbersome. So it can take what we're estimating by the time you put the request for proposal together, solicit vendors, get the bids back, select a vendor, and also execute the contract before any of the work can begin is at minimum 6 months. I would estimate probably more on the 9-month side. So given that an additional 3 months is probably not, 3 months is not going to be adequate time for the vendor to complete the study and have it submitted back to the legislature and approved by the board by January 1st of 19. So that's a concern. So delayed implementation may need to be considered in order to be able to effectively put this study together. The rest of the provisions in the bill, and this is going to be kind of a blanket statement for all three of these bills. Essentially, staff needs clarification on how this is intended to be implemented. So the way it's currently written is this bill and 501 replaces the general anesthesia permit with the deep sedation general anesthesia permit and all of the different, or the new requirements. So the question is, if this becomes effective on January 1st of 18, what happens to all of those permit holders that have the current GA, CS, and OCS permits? Are they intended to turn those in? Are they no longer valid? Then what would their application timeline look like to be able to reapply to become GA permit holders, OCS, or it'll be moderate sedation and minimal sedation permit holders? So there could be a gap depending on how it's intended to be implemented, and a lack of providers is a concern for implementation. Another issue is Breeze would not be able to be set up in a way for us to be able to issue these new permits by January 1st of 2018. The Breeze modifications are estimated to take 2 to 3 years to be able to do this. So, and they would prefer to wait until we had regulations in place. So these are all issues that we're coming across. So we may consider posing these as potential implementation issues to the author's office. It's unfortunate. I'm not saying that we can't do it. It's just things that are going to take time and work and are going to have a fiscal impact. I'm not sure what the entire fiscal impact is going to be yet. That information is being reported to the Appropriations Committee and should be available within the next week or so. And that's true for all three of these bills. But ultimately, a January 1st of 2019 deadline to report, to provide a report back to the legislature may not be feasible due to the contracting requirements, and then how we are expected to implement, or what the expectations for implementation need to be clarified as well. So those are staff's concerns for all three of the bills at this time.
Thank you very much. Complicated. Also, I have a question relative to the report that we're required to do. Is this a report? Let me back it up. This report seems to be a perception of the outcome of access to care rather than an outcomes assessment after the implementation of the statute or the statutory change. Otherwise, we don't have enough time to develop data from an outcomes assessment rather than what do you think this is going to affect. So I'm wondering what kind of validity that report will have.
So these are all questions that we've been asking around the office and trying to get a better grasp on. And I don't mean to jump around, but I think it's important because we're looking at all of three of these bills together and how, if they all were to pass, how this would affect us. So you're looking at, I think it's 4 different reports as a result of all of these bills. So the first one in 224 is the high quality data about the outcomes and complications related to pediatric dental sedation and anesthesia. The parameters that are outlined in this proposed statute aren't detailed enough for us to really understand what kind of a report we're going to be coming out with or what the potential costs are involved with the development of that report. If you go to 392, this is an access to care report, which is a little bit different. And then when you go to 501, so the 392 report gives us a little bit more specific parameters for us to be able to base what the report is going to be on. And then 501, again, is more specific in the parameters, but then it also requests the pediatric mortality and morbidity rate as well. As part of staff's review, we would request additional information as to the intent and what detailed information the legislature would hope to get out of these reports
Okay.
in order for them to be effective.
Yeah, it's kind of foggy right now. Okay. Do we have any additional comments or questions from committee members regarding AB 224? Yes.
So as I'm reading this, I'm a little confused, and I need some clarification. It says that, okay, so okay, if you go to page 6, at the very end of page 6 of the bill, at the beginning of page 7, so in number 1, it says operating dentist. Both the dentist and at least one staff member shall be trained in PALS and airway management. And then you go to number 2, it says a dental sedation assistant permit holder that is trained in PALS and airway management. Could these two be the same person?
So
It doesn't say whether or not it could be, or it may be two different
So another
people.
reason why staff is highly recommending that we take a watch position is that these
Yes.
bills are in a constant
Okay.
state of flux.
Good.
And
Alright.
so staff was not aware of these amendments until they came out. And so yes, a dental sedation assistant permit holder is considered a dentist assistant. But the way that this version of the bill is currently written, it requires a dental sedation assistant permit holder to be present. And so amendments, I've been told, are in the works to revise this. And
Yeah.
so I don't think that this is going to look the same
Okay.
probably in the next
All right.
week or
Well,
so.
another comment to you, number 3. It says a dedicated monitor. And it goes on to say, for purposes of this paragraph, dedicated monitor means a surgeon, dental sedation assistant permit holder, general anesthesia permit holder, or a nurse anesthetist. And then it goes on to say the dedicated monitor shall be solely dedicated to administering anesthesia. Well, we know for a fact dental sedation assistant cannot administer anesthesia.
That has been presented to
So
the
they-
committee staff. They're aware of that issue.
Okay.
And they're
All right.
also
I mean,
aware.
I'm just reading what's before
Right.
me. And I just
Absolutely.
want to make sure I bring up those comments because
Absolutely.
I don't agree with what's written in
So
here.
board
and
staff.
I have more questions, you know.
But
Okay.
again, please keep in mind, we've not been consulted on this.
Yes.
And so there are a lot of things that we are aware of that either they are not or they have some different interpretation of.
Okay.
Okay. Any other
So-
comments?
So before,
Yes.
we're kind of at cross purposes here.
Okay. I'm sorry?
We're kind of at cross purposes here.
We're at cross purposes?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Ask a question about the process. As this is going through the assembly, this one's going through the assembly and going back and forth, does the assembly, when it gets to its probably B&P committee, does it ask the board input on that? In other words, I had similar questions on those last 3 items in there. And one of the questions was, who provides that other dental sedation assistant? So how do we put input into that, or are we asked to put input into it? Or do they just go on and go to the Senate one?
No,
No? Okay,
no. We will have discussions about
okay. I didn't know how it works.
it. So just as a summary on this one, we will send a letter. The letter will not be a letter of support or opposition. It will be simply asking for clarification on at least the 3 issues that Ms. Wallace has outlined. So everybody's comfortable with that? Any other board discussion? Any public discussion?
Ms. Burton? Okay. Hi, Alan Felsenfeld, representing the California Dental Association. We agree with and support many of the recommendations of the Dental Board, including increasing and improving the board's data collection, defining anesthesia by levels of sedation, and restructuring the permitting system to ensure the appropriate level of expertise is always in the room with a patient. Also expanding the enforcement authority of the board. We appreciate Assemblyman Thurman's inclusion of these things in the bill. We are also supportive of the recent amendments proposed by the committee regarding the required dental team personnel for general anesthesia procedures. Our understanding is that those amendments need to be corrected, though, and we have concerns about the new language, talking about the same thing, requiring a DSA trained in PALS along with a designated monitor in both moderate sedation and GA. This is not aligned with the national AAPD guidelines or the original committee intent. However, CDA strongly believes that if the legislature implements the recommendations of the board, it must respect the full recommendations, including the need to analyze the implications of reducing the scope of practice and find ways to establish and ensure new models of care so that young children are not being kept from receiving needed anesthesia and dental treatment. We want to ensure that any new requirements or regulations are thoughtful and, as we said this morning, evidence-based, both in their effect on the dental care delivery system and the administrative function of the board. We continue to have concerns with this bill and its confusing language, including the uncorrected amendments, and that this bill fails to approach the value and that the approach fails to value this analysis. We are opposed unless amended.
Mr. Chair, Gary Cooper, representing the California Association of Oral and Maxillofacial Surgeons. To reiterate what my colleague, Dr. Felsenfeld, said, we certainly support Mr. Thurman's concept in trying to help to improve the pediatric anesthesia system in California. We certainly are supportive of that, which is why we've introduced both SB 501 and 392. But we do continue to oppose 224 unless amended for several reasons, and I'll let Dr. Moore discuss that in a minute. But just to give you a little bit of an update, the Assembly Business and Professions Committee heard this bill 2 weeks ago, and the committee amendments that were recommended by the chair went a little bit too far. They've added oral conscious sedation to it. They did not deal with the concern that we have that to get a general anesthesia permit, there need to be 52 cases as opposed to 20, because we think 52 cases is far too many, that no one could actually complete that. And we've understood that Mr. Thurman is not willing to accept the new amendments. He wants to hear the bill this Wednesday as it is in print right now. So we are concerned about that. The concern we have also is that the study he's asking for in this bill is valid. Obviously, we want to know what the different concerns are with regard to pediatric outcomes. But in his bill, in 224, nowhere does it discuss how does adding another anesthesiologist in the room, how does adding more training, how does that affect access to care if you have more people? That part has not been put in AB 224. That's in 501, that's in 392. So while we certainly support Mr. Thurman's idea and his concept in trying to make sure that the pediatric anesthesia process in California is safe for all children, we are concerned about this particular bill, AB 224. And with that, I'll defer to Dr. Moore.
With the chair's consent, I'll give the follow-on testimony. Is that okay?
I'm sorry?
I'm asking you if it's all right if I follow
Sure. Yes,
Mr. Cooper.
go ahead.
Okay.
Just introduce yourself.
My name is Dr. Larry Moore. I'm the Vice President of the California Association of Oral and Maxillofacial Surgeons, representing over 700 oral and maxillofacial surgeons in California. And we want to recognize the great care that the anesthesia subcommittee took in providing the recommendations to enhance pediatric safety in during dental procedures involving anesthesia. And again, share with you Calamus's commitment to patient safety. For the reasons that Mr. Cooper has elucidated and the confusion that we also share in the language, which contains conflicting definitions and terms, and also inappropriately references a level of training which would not be appropriate for dental assistants, but rather for licensed healthcare providers. For these reasons and others, we've taken an opposed unless amended position on this bill. The bill, as recently amended, would require 3 people present for a procedure on a child under 7 years of age, including a dentist, an assistant, and a dedicated monitor with special training. The bill language was amended and is so confusing that even content experts like myself don't really understand what it is that it intends to do. It also would require that a study be conducted to examine the effects of any new legislation or regulation on access to care prior to implementation. Actually, it doesn't require that it be done prior to implementation. It requires a study be done, but it proposes to implement the changes first and then study their effect later. The numerical requirement of 52 cases for the initial issuing of a permit and for each renewal would effectively eliminate about 750 general anesthesia permits of less than 900 that exist in the state currently. And so the implementation of these changes prior to studying their effect would have the effect of creating a drastic crisis in access to care for children under 6 years of age. And since most of the cases that my specialty sees in children are urgent care cases, not cases that can be elective and can be scheduled in 6 months or a year or 2 years or however long it takes to do the study, this will be a disaster if this is implemented. And so for these reasons, we would like to oppose AB 224. Even though this is a well-intentioned bill, as it exists, unless it is heavily amended, it will create a crisis for children in California. Thank you very much for your time.
This is Karen Karp from California Association of Nurse Anesthetists, and our organization also wants to thank the subcommittee on pediatric anesthesia for all your hard work on this issue. We have an oppose unless amended position on AB 224, and specifically because of supervision language that was inserted for certified registered nurse anesthetists. There's no requirement for CRNA supervision in California, either on the federal or state levels. California CRNAs currently provide pediatric dental anesthesia services in offices where a dentist holds a permit from the dental board. So no legislation is required for us to work currently, as we do, providing services in dental offices. Since 1986, when CRNAs were accorded Medicare billing rights on Medicare Part B by the Centers of Medicare and Medicaid Services, there has been no requirement for supervision of nurse anesthetists. In 2009, Medicare exempted California from CRNA supervision for Part A reimbursement of healthcare facilities, and this was challenged at all levels of the California courts by the California Society of Anesthesiologists. The appellate court ruled unanimously to uphold the exemption, and so now we do have case law that supports independent CRNA practice in the state of California. Currently, only one statutory requirement limits access to and disincentivizes use of CRNA services in dental offices, and that's the inability of CRNAs to apply for dental permits. So dentists are currently unnecessarily burdened to meet the educational, administrative, and financial requirements to obtain permits in order to utilize nurse anesthetists in office settings. CRNA supervision is needless It confers liability for the dentist, who is now responsible for an independently practicing provider. It conflicts with case law, and probably most importantly, it doesn't allow us to help with the access of care to services for dental patients in California. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. Michael Mashney, I'm here on behalf of the California Society of Dentists, Anesthesiologists. And this pertains to all three bills, so I don't have to come up here 3 times, but I can go over it if there's questions. The California Society of Dentists, Anesthesiologists represents dentists with the highest level of training in general anesthesia and dentistry, and would like to offer the following comments regarding the current proposed legislation. Last year, the California Dental Board studied pediatric general anesthesia. Every expert in this area in anesthesia testified that there must be a separate independent anesthesia provider, particularly those identified by the Dental Board Committee to be at the highest risk, children under 7. The California Assembly Business and Professions Committee added a dental sedation assistant as an independent and permitted general anesthesia provider. Across the medical and dental disciplines, licensed professionals who provide deep sedation general anesthesia have at least 3 years of training. It would be dangerous to assume a dental sedation assistant with minimal and informal training would be qualified as an anesthesia provider, even if they were trained in pediatric advanced life support. Pediatric advanced life support does not teach emergency response in regard to deep sedation and general anesthesia. The American Heart Association statement regarding the objectives of PALS is as follows. The goal of the PALS course is to improve the quality of care provided to seriously ill or injured children, resulting in improved outcomes. PALS simply does not teach anyone to respond to an anesthetic emergency. We feel this is a dangerous proposal, and the Dental Board should oppose any proposed legislation that omits a permitted and licensed independent anesthesia provider as delineated in the 2016 report to Senator Hill. Secondly, we feel that requiring a second anesthesia support staff with PALS will not increase safety, but will just add an additional expense, which will make the access to care issue harder. In summary, we support AB 224 prior to the Business and Professions Committee amendment that added an assistant as a qualified personnel. Would also state that we would support any of the versions of the legislation, whether it's 224 or 501, that remain true to the Dental Board's original recommendations, namely that children under 7 have a separate qualified independent anesthesia provider. And we would request that the Dental Board take a position that they only support legislation that remains true to the original recommendations, including the under 7 provision.
Okay, just for the record, before you go on, would you say your name again for the record?
Sure. Michael Mashney. Mashney, M-A-S-H-N-I.
Thank you.
Thank you for allowing me to speak today. My name is Paula Whiteman. I'm here representing the governing board of the Statewide American Academy of Pediatrics, an organization of over 5,000 pediatricians. We have no financial stake in this cause. Our sole interest is in the health, welfare, and safety of the children of California. The AAP-AAPD guidelines represent minimum safety standards and are meant as a baseline consensus and not a limit on safety measures. With that said, we appreciate the California Dental Board's decision to require a dedicated, separate, qualified and competent anesthesia provider for children under age 7 years of age undergoing deep sedation and general anesthesia in the dental setting. We believe that following the California Dental Board's guidelines as represented in Assembly Bill 224 before the amendments were made by the Assembly B&P Committee will guarantee greater safety for children. We stand in opposition to SB 501, which removes that single most important conclusion of the California Dental Board to have that second provider for a child under age 7, and we are also in opposition to SB 392, as waiting until next year to act is an unnecessary delay that will place more children at risk of injury or death, and as well as more families at risk of losing a loved one. Thank you again for your decision to recommend an end to the single operator anesthetist model for children under age 7 years of age, and for allowing me to speak here again today. Thank you.
Hi, Laura Purcell, California Society of Periodontists. I just want to put it on record that we oppose AB 224 as it's currently written. Thank you.
Okay, I think that's all the public testimony on that. Do we, council, do we need a motion on this? To move this?
Could I say?
Yes.
I'd just like to have one, I would like to make one more comment on this, 244, if I may. I know that for the minimal oral conscious sedation, as the bill is written, that the permit holder can only use one single dose of one single medication. Having done this, I know that sometimes that doesn't really work well. So working in community health centers, I have 2 other pediatric dentists that work with me, and I've talked to them, and also I've talked to other pediatric dentists in my community. The concern that we have, those of us who do minimal oral conscious sedation using one single dose of one drug, could result in access to care. And let me tell you why. If it doesn't work, we have to reschedule the patient. If it does work, we'll probably have to split the treatment into 2-3 visits and not just one. Because, the medication may not work as long, for the treatment that's required of the children. So I just want to bring that up. I know it's in the bill, but, I am talking on behalf of, some permit holders out there that do have a concern about, that provision. And if I may I make one comment? I actually, this may be totally out of line, but if I may, I'd like to address to the pediatricians. As you know, dental disease or dental caries in children is completely preventable. And I hope that the pediatricians out there would join force with the dentists to help prevent this disease so that none of these children will ever have to come in and have to go through what they have to go through, especially, having to go through the anesthesia, general anesthesia and all that for the dental disease. So I'm hoping that pediatricians out there are listening, and if you really want to help us prevent this, please try to educate the parents, and please help us with the prevention practices so that none of the children will ever have to go through this. Thank you.
Yes, in response to Dr. Lay's comments regarding the limiting in the minimal sedation to one dose of one drug, reading from the recommendations that were submitted from the board to Senator Hill on December 30 of 2016, under minimal sedation, administration is limited to a single dose of a single sedative drug, not a single drug. So there is a difference between a single dose of a single drug to a single dose of a single sedative drug, which then allows for some combinations that could be more effective, according to a number of pediatric dentists. So there seems to be a word left out there.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And so then I guess my question to you is the items that we're asking for clarification on, how strongly do you feel about adding that to that list?
I feel strongly we need clarification moving forward as much as we can get. I think it's sort of a consensus of most people in this room that there's a lot that we don't understand in the language that we need clarification for. So Again, I'm a little bit confused at this point as to what position we're going to take. I know Ms. Burton began this agenda item by saying that we weren't going to take a position. However, Sarah Wallace said we were going to take a watch position, so.
Sorry, I consider that a non-position. But I can add that as part of staff's question, if that's what the committee would like.
Okay, I think that would be good.
Okay, the next bill, if there's nothing else on that one, let's talk about SB 392.
So SB 392 requires a report to the legislature by January 1st of 2019, a report and an analysis on the effects of the access to care for pediatric dental patients as it relates to the requirement of adding a second general anesthesia permit holder to be present, among other requirements. It also requires the board to create by January 1st of 2019 the development of a pediatric life support and airway management course that's equivalent to the AAP and AAPD guidelines or guidelines determined by the board in order to protect the public health and safety consistent with section 1601.2. So again, staff is recommending just watching this bill. However, we also recommend issuing a letter seeking clarification and regarding the implementation. So again, with the report being due by January 1st of 2019, we could encounter some issues with the timeline, especially involving looking for an outside vendor, the contracting timeline, and then allowing adequate time for that vendor to complete the report and then also provide it to the board for consideration prior to it being submitted to the legislature. As it relates to the course, this is something new. It's not something similar to what we have currently in statute, so we would have to develop the course in regulation, and the regulatory process can take 18 to 24 months at minimum. So having a course by January 1st of 2019 may not be feasible given the restraints of the rulemaking process. So those are staff's concerns relating to those two provisions.
Any questions, members? Public comment?
Thank you for the opportunity to speak here today. My name is Jeffrey Elo. I'm currently the president-elect of the California Association of Oral and Maxillofacial Surgeons, better known as CalAMUS. I'm here on behalf of the over 700 practicing oral and maxillofacial surgeon members who practice here in California. I'm also a full professor, full-time at Western University of Health Sciences in Pomona, and a part-time attending faculty at Loma Linda University Medical Center. I'm also an adjunct faculty for the Family Practice Medicine Residency and the Urgent Care Fellowship programs at Pomona Valley Regional Medical Center. I currently serve as a board examiner and content expert in adult and pediatric anesthesia for the American Board of Oral and Maxillofacial Surgery, which is the independent organization that tests and certifies the training of oral and maxillofacial surgeons nationwide. As you may know, in light of the Dental Board's recommendations, following the comprehensive study by the Anesthesia Subcommittee, CalAMUS has sponsored two pieces of legislation related to pediatric anesthesia, including SB 392, authored by Senator Patricia Bates. SB 392 incorporates the Dental Board's recommendation to study the effects of any proposed new legislation or regulation on access to care for pediatric dental patients prior to the implementation of any changes in anesthesia practices. We appreciate the Dental Board's recognition of the need to conduct a thorough analysis of the effects of any proposed new legislation on regulation on access to care for pediatric dental patients prior to the implementation of any change. As OMSs, our primary mission is to provide safe, comfortable, and optimal care that is affordable and accessible. The Dental Board Committee made various recommendations to improve anesthesia safety in the dental office setting. As OMSs, we have already implemented mandatory standards of practice that are more robust than what is currently required by California law. But these standards do not apply to non-CalAMUS anesthesia providers and are therefore voluntary. As part of our commitment to patient safety, as part of SB 392, the Dental Board would develop a course in pediatric life support and airway management that is equivalent to the American Academy of Pediatrics and the American Academy of Pediatric Dentistry guidelines, or guidelines determined by the Dental Board, in order to protect the public health and safety as specified. As part of this bill, the Dental Board will have discretion, consistent with the guidelines, over the solicitation and subsequent acceptance of proposals from continuing education vendors to provide the course. The goal of this legislation is to offer a reasoned and evidence-based approach to further enhance patient safety of pediatric procedures involving anesthesia, as well as first study any possible impacts to access to care prior to the implementation of any policy changes. The loss of any child is a tragedy, and we are always committed to patient safety, but we must ensure that policy is not changed because of a single provider's error. We must ensure that any policy changes are based upon evidence-based decisions, and we believe SB 392 helps us get there. Thank you very much.
Alan Felsenfeld, California Dental Association again, and thank you, Dr. Elo. We certainly agree with your comments. The CDA has taken a support position on SB 392 because of the thoughtful and cautious approach it is taking. It's really not a good idea to enact legislation and see how we did and what happened, as opposed to thinking it through prior to the actual enactment of any restrictive legislation. Many stakeholders have expressed concern that PALS is not the right course for what we're doing, and that's all we have, though, right now, and we do need better courses in airway management and things like that. CDA supports creating one or more new courses that would focus on pediatric life support, airway management, emergency responses to anesthetic problems, and that would be more targeted and appropriate for the safety concerns that we're discussing today. We also recognize that within the expertise of the board, this is not what you do to create courses. There are educators out there, commercial vendors out there, people who put on CE courses all the time that would be in a position to do that. Certainly you all should be setting the criteria and what we're looking for in these types of courses, and you should monitor them as well. If the bill moves forward, we'll want to work with the author to help at the CDA level. Thank you.
Just one more staff comment relating to the course. Staff's also questioning what the intended purpose of the course would be, what the outcome would be. Is it going to be a requirement of the permit holders to take the course, because that's not clear in this bill, or would it be considered a continuing education course? Typically, when the board is in the development of a course, it's also outlined in the statute that the course is also required as a condition of licensure or renewal. So further clarification on what the intended purpose of the course is supposed to have or be utilized after it's developed would be important as well.
Hi, Paula Whiteman, again from the American Academy of Pediatrics, California. In terms of the access to care argument, they're trying to say that the workforce is not available, but currently in California, there are approximately 9,300 anesthesia providers that have active licenses and are available to fulfill the role of a dedicated anesthesia provider for deep sedation and general anesthesia in dental offices. The CRNAs can currently practice and act as a second provider. With an oral surgeon, they don't need a general anesthesia permit to do so under current law. This would not change under AB 224. So if you just look at the numbers, there may be close to 700 oral surgeons. There are over 6,100 physician anesthesiologists, 65 dentist anesthesiologists, and about 2,400 CRNAs, bringing the total to about 9,300 providers that could step in and assist with the access of having that requirement of an additional provider for those under age 7.
Dr. Larry Moore, Vice President of Cal Amos. We've heard these numbers before, and while they're true, of the 9,000 some physician medical anesthesiologists in California, only 78 of them have a general anesthesia permit. And to do office-based anesthesia, which we're talking about here, you either have to have a dental board permit, whether you're an MD, a DO, a DDS, or a DDS, dentist anesthesiologist, you all have to have the same permit to work in an office setting. A medical doctor cannot provide anesthesia in a dental office without a dental board permit. And to date, of the 9,000 something, there are 78 who have decided to have a permit, and I believe about half of those permits are delinquent because of difficulties in scheduling the exam. Of the dentist anesthesiologists, there are 65. About a third of them practice the same model as the oral and maxillofacial surgeons do, which is a team concept of anesthesia delivery in which the surgeon administers the anesthesia and with the assistance of 2 trained staff manages the case. One of those staff is dedicated to monitor the case only, and that's their job. What we're talking about really here in most of these bills is what's the definition of that person, the person who's the monitor. OMS has a remarkably good safety record. Of the 9 anesthesia deaths that occurred during the dental board study period, only 1 occurred in an oral and maxillofacial surgery office. 5 occurred in hospital settings with MD anesthesiologists present. 2 were oral conscious sedation, where increasingly heavy doses of oral sedative agents were given until the child underwent an overdose. That's my understanding of it. So we're talking about an anesthesia team concept. It takes a team to deliver safe anesthesia. And the OMS team model is what's been required of our members for many years now. This is really what we need to do, because wishing that the 2,000 some CRNAs and the 9,000 some MDs are suddenly going to provide dental anesthesia, they're going to buy a permit and go through all the difficult steps it takes to provide safe anesthesia in that setting, especially in an itinerant model where you're bringing your monitors and your drugs in a suitcase with you, and nobody there but you understands what's going on. When we get to the discussion on 501, I want to point out how that rectifies these issues without disturbing the access to care. Thank you for that.
Thank you. So members, what is your pleasure? This is a different bill, different house. We could also send a letter on this one, raising our implementation questions about when the report is due and the board's ability to implement, and also to outline our concerns about the course requirements and the regs that would be required. So what's your pleasure?
Yeah, I would like to see that letter written. I think there's clarification needed on this, in addition to clarification as to who's required to take this, when are they required to take it, so forth.
And then the other issue would be not being clear about the intended purpose of the course. Okay.
You know, I think there's some concerns about the study which were raised in the previous bill as well. In other words, the time required for implementation and so on. Maybe I don't need to restate that.
I thought I said that first.
Oh, I thought you were speaking about the course itself. I'm sorry.
So then the last one is SB 501. Pleasure.
Again, SB 501, staff has similar concerns to AB 224 relating to the timeline it would, and the requirements it would take to implement and execute the study that's required by January 1st of 19, as well as how the implementation of the new permit titles are intended to work and what would happen to those that are current permit holders. So it would be a similar letter to outlining the concerns of AB 224.
Any discussion? Public comment?
SB 501, again, Dr. Larry Moore, Cal Amos, I speak in support. SB 501 is a rational mechanism for providing needed and powerful enhancements in safety for pediatric anesthesia in California. It eliminates the archaic language that has been so confusing here in California for what level of sedation we're talking about. And it replaces it with language that's been suggested by the American Society of Anesthesiologists, and I'm referring to general anesthesia, deep sedation, moderate sedation, and minimal sedation. And our position is that it doesn't matter how you get there, it's where you go to that matters in anesthesia. The agents and how they're delivered don't matter. It's the level of anesthesia that you come to that matters. And on every level, SB 501 provides a mechanism where the current situation in California, which has actually a very good safety record, can be preserved and at the same time powerfully enhanced by requiring augmentation in the number of people providing anesthesia team care, and the qualifications and training of those people. And this is sort of where the SB 392 dovetails with SB 501, because PALS, which we all may have a different thought for what PALS means, but PALS is a definite term, capital PALS, which means Pediatric Advanced Life Support. And it's a training program that is intended to be at the provider level, which is really inappropriate for the sort of dental procedures that we're talking about here. But at the same time, meaningful training in pediatric life support and emergency airway management is required. It really needs to be out there. It is not currently there. And so we're looking for something that can be applied in the dental model and can provide continuing education and part of certification programs for dental sedation assistants and also for oral and maxillofacial surgery anesthesia assistants and other dental assistants who assist in anesthesia. I believe that SB 501 will provide continuity of care. It will not create a crisis in access to care, and it will simplify and bring up to date the nomenclature in anesthesia care delivery. Thank you very much. And we are, again, in strong support of SB 501.
Alan Felsenfeld again from the California Dental Association. The CDA is in support of SB 501 because this is a bill that is grounded in the best practices to set higher standards for training, ensure competency for those treating young children, and realigning the permitting system and improving board enforcement. We are thankful our colleagues at the Cal Amos generated this bill for Senator Glazer, and we are in support of it. One of the elements of this bill that sets it apart from AB 224, as I indicated earlier, is that it understands and agrees with the cautionary statement that the the Dental Board had in their letter to Senator Hill in December, that an analysis of the effects of the proposed law or regulation on access to care must be completed prior to the enactment of a bill, but during the policy-making process, not after the fact. CDA believes this bill takes a solid evidence-based approach to implementing the changes to the training and permitting process that are most likely to result in improved safety in the provision of pediatric dental anesthesia. We will continue working with the author and legislature on the legislation as it moves through the process to ensure we work through unintended consequences, which are very important, that could negatively impact access to care.
Thank you. Michael Mashney, California Society of Dentist Anesthesiologists. Just one point that SB 501, we're opposed because SB 501 leaves out the most important aspect, and that's a separate qualified anesthesia provider for the patients that the Dental Board Committee itself identified at higher risk. How can you have them at higher risk and not do something real to change them? A dental assistant with minimal training is not qualified, period. It states it in the American Academy of Pediatric Dentistry guidelines, and the letters from the author verify that that's the intent. Thank you.
Hi, Paula Whiteman from the American Academy of Pediatrics of California. We oppose SB 501 as written because it offers a false sense of security that something is being done to prevent deaths of young children in dental chairs, while still permitting the use of the single operator anesthetist model under age 7 years of age. So we respectfully ask that you take in mind that SB 501 does not include your most important recommendation that there be a second trained and competent anesthesia provider. It simply is not following your recommendations, and that should be taken into consideration.
Anyone else? Okay.
Brian?
Yes.
Just a comment. Regarding the statement that was made that SB 501 will not result in a crisis in access to care, I'm not sure that 224 has been established as creating a crisis in access to care yet. So I'm not sure that one would not cause a crisis where the other one would. I think we're a little bit jumping the gun to make a statement that this one would not create a crisis in access to care. That's kind of tongue-in-cheek saying that the other one would, and that's not really founded at this point. Okay. Are we finished?
You gonna?
Yes.
Well, in my world, this will create access to care. That's all I can say. No study has been done, and we're waiting for that to happen before we come back and say, yes, it's created an access to care. I see the patients that probably most of you don't. You know, and they probably present 80% of the dental disease. We can play numbers if we want. You know, 9,000, you know, available providers that can provide anesthesia in dental offices. 79, 78 have permit holders right now. Is there really an appetite there unless the 9,000 are unemployed at this time? I'm not sure if we can get all 9,000 to come to my office to provide the anesthesia. We can play numbers too. 37,000 licensed dentists in the state of California. How many actually see these children that I see? Very few. So when it comes to access to care, yes, I do believe that this will create an access to care. But of course, nobody will believe that until it actually happens, until these children end up in hospital. Then everybody will be crying, screaming, yes, we have an access to care issue. But I think until that happens, everyone will say, yes, I have the solution. So we'll just have to wait and see what that solution will be.
Okay, Ms. Burton, are you finished with this item?
I am,
Okay.
unless there's something else.
Any,
We're done with those, and we will do the letter for the third one as well.
Okay, moving on to agenda item number 6, discussion on possible action regarding proposed legislative language submitted by the California Association of Nurse Anesthetists.
So, as you know, CANA came to the last meeting, and the committee and the board was able to hear a presentation by their representatives. Since that meeting, they have submitted proposed language, and that language is included in the board meeting packets, and we have Monica Miller and Karen Karp here today to present to the board.
Mr. Chair and members, Monica Miller on behalf of the California Association of Nurse Anesthetists, and I have with me today Karen Karp, who is our practice chair and is very well versed, as you know, on this issue. First and foremost, we want to thank you for having us both at the February 23rd board meeting as well as today, and really appreciate your staff working with us potentially on the language. Want to make sure you guys see it, are okay with it, et cetera, as we continue to work the second track, which is with the legislature, in an attempt to hopefully get this into a piece of legislation. So I'll turn it over to Karen Karp to speak more specifically, and obviously if you've had a chance to look at it and have any questions, we want to make sure we're available to you as well. So thank you.
Thank you again for the opportunity to be here today. Certified registered nurse anesthetists or advanced practice registered nurses who are required to have a minimum of 8 years of combined education, training, critical care nursing experience before passing a national certifying examination and entering the anesthesia workforce with a master's or doctoral degree. There are 2,400 active licensed CRNAs practicing in California. CRNAs do not require physician supervision in California and practice independently in every setting that anesthesia is delivered. CRNAs are the primary providers of anesthesia in rural and medically underserved communities, providing 65% of the anesthesia services to these populations. Currently, 9 counties in California depend solely on CRNAs for all of their anesthesia and pain management requirements. CRNAs also practice in team care settings on a daily basis with surgeons, dentists, podiatrists, anesthesiologists, and other healthcare providers to deliver safe, high-quality, and affordable anesthesia care. CRNAs see every day on a first-hand basis the continued need of vulnerable communities for access to safe, effective dental anesthesia care. But one current California statutory requirement impedes upon CRNA's ability to offer anesthesia services in dental offices. And that is, we are not currently able to obtain a permit from the dental board to provide anesthesia services without a dentist being required to hold that same permit. Instead, dentists, many of whom practice in rural or underserved communities that may not have other anesthesia providers available, then CRNAs must obtain their own permits. This creates an undue burden on dentists for using CRNAs in dental offices, which does not exist in any other setting. This includes hospitals, dental ambulatory surgery centers where CRNAs currently provide pediatric dental anesthesia on a regular basis, as well as office settings for a multitude of other specialty services. This is not a scope battle between CRNAs and other anesthesia providers. We all work collaboratively in our daily lives, and there's a need in our communities that provides opportunities for all anesthesia providers in California. So we would like to ask the dental board for your support in moving forward with legislation that would confer eligibility to CRNAs to apply for dental anesthesia permits. We thank you for your help and consideration, and we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you for spending your time and presenting that to us. Members of the board of the committee have any questions or comments to make at this time? Yes.
Let's see, on the third page, where it says I-2827, it says the utilization of the nurse anesthetist to provide anesthesia services in an acute facility shall be approved by the Acute Care Facility Administration and the appropriate committee. So let's take that piece first. What is the Acute Care Facility Administration, and do they have jurisdiction over dental offices?
That would be the individual administration of the dental office. So whatever body that is that governs the administration of care at that facility.
Through the chair, I think I can answer that. That is the provision that allows CRNAs to function in medical offices. In dental offices, that would not apply. They would be authorized according to their proposed language under 1646.10. In other words, this is 2827 is in the Nursing Practice Act.
Right.
And that is what allows them to work in ACCs and hospitals and facilities like that.
and it contains a prohibition on anesthesia administered in a dental office as it's currently written. They're proposing to delete that, to amend out that prohibition in that Nursing Practice Act, okay? And at the same time, put an authorization in 1646.10. So it's really a procedural thing. It's neither here nor there.
Thank you for clarifying.
The first sentence actually supersedes the second sentence in terms of priority. So the question again is that I don't see the jurisdiction question answered.
Well,
let me get
if
to
I
this.
may.
Go ahead.
The Nursing Practice Act the Nursing Board does not have jurisdiction over dental offices.
Right.
That's where this lives. So
This lives in the
there is a
nursing board,
jurisdictional issue.
not in the dental
Am I right? I mean,
Yes,
So the dental
that's
board
correct.
is exclusive.
So that needs to be worked through. The second question I had was, it's my understanding that nurse anesthetist cannot hold a DEA number. Therefore, how would you have access to the appropriate anesthetic drugs in an itinerant mode?
Mhm. Really excellent question. And the way that works in offices currently, both for nurse anesthetists and for anesthesiologists, is the operative provider obtains the medications. And so that's currently in the case in many different types of offices. And the dentist actually has the capability to order medications, all kinds of medications for anesthesia and adjuncts by virtue of his or her license. So it's not the dental permit that does that, it's the license of the dentist.
So the following question would be, how does this proposal change what's already on the statute, where the dentist must be the permit holder and
Well,
then procures the medications?
But we're asking to change that in statute so that CRNAs could be eligible to be permit holders, to apply as a permit holder, but the ability to hold a permit and administer anesthesia in an office doesn't necessarily mean that the anesthesia provider would be bringing their own medications on site. So.
I'm still not clear.
If I may, there is some information that is out there about how that works operationally, and it's kind of complicated, and I would like to forward that to staff for review, and then maybe have legal look at it a little bit, because I think it's an old issue. This letter, there was a discussion with the DEA about how this all worked in permitting, and it's somewhat complicated. I can't say I fully understand it from a legal standpoint, because it raises questions that probably need a little more study, but it works this way in a lot of places where the facility itself provides the drugs. The CRNA administers only, doesn't prescribe, doesn't dispense necessarily, and that exempts them from the registration requirement, as I understand it.
That's correct, and the exemption does come from the DEA.
Right.
So, based on what you just said, as I understand this language, this could be a general dentist. Would a general dentist have all of these drugs?
Well, I think the question in my mind is, and I think I know the answer is, can a general dentist, no anesthesia permit, order general anesthesia drugs if they don't have a permit?
I think the answer is no.
And I don't know the answer to that. I would have to punt that to legal. I think that it is, first of all, dentists have the authority to use any drug or do any procedure within the scope of practice of dentistry, including anesthesia. The permit is an add-on to that, so I don't know where that delineation is, and I need some help with that. But like I say, I can circulate that opinion, and I think that would be a good place to start. But there's plenty of precedent for the facility providing the drugs, somebody coming in and using them, because a DEA permit does not travel. It's facility specific. Every facility
you know, no matter who you bring in, usually the facility is, again, I'd probably need some help with this because I know individuals can register and have a permit, but as I understand it, if you're ordering, it's got to be used at that facility, and you can't carry it around. So that's federal law. We don't really deal with that a lot, so I think we, need some help with that.
And I think, and my question back to Canna would be, that's my issue with number 2 on page 2. You have an itinerant person who is going into a dental office to provide services, but yet this language requires an on-site inspection of that place.
Yes. And that's our understanding of what the requirements are for dental permits.
So this is my office. Why should I put myself at that risk that you will have what you're supposed to have?
Well, each individual anesthesia provider carries their own liability insurance and is responsible for their own practice. So by having a separate anesthesia provider that has that liability insurance, then you have a provider who's responsible for themselves.
But I see it more than an issue of having the insurance. It's the act itself that I'm concerned about. And I don't know what protection this gives on either side.
And I suppose you could say that for any anesthesia provider that comes in and gives the service, because it really shouldn't be any difference for any permit holder. It should really be the same for all types of independent anesthesia providers. The rules should be the same and the regulations should be the same. But I can say that the nurse anesthetists that I know that do provide services in a dental setting where the dentist holds the permit, the dentist orders those medications. So those are available for the nurse anesthetist, and the nurse anesthetist is responsible and accountable for what they do in that office.
Okay. And what is this something that you intend for this year, next year? What is your plan with this?
I think for us, we want to make sure it's done right, and so I don't think we're on a fast track to do anything. We just want to make sure that it's done right and it's done in accordance with statute and regulation, and that all the pieces are there to provide safe practice and to increase access. That's really our goal.
Okay. Any other comments or questions from members of the committee before we move on?
Just one.
Yes, Bruce.
Sorry to keep coming back to me.
Okay.
But, I think that we have decided not to take positions on any anesthesia bills because it's a work in progress. Now, this isn't even a bill, but I think that this language will probably change depending on what happens with these other bills. So it might be premature for us to really say where we are on it. I mean, I think you understand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's reasonable.
Because this would be more appropriate with our current language than it will be with some of the proposed language. So I just want to make that point.
Thank you.
I look at this as informational to us at this point,
Right.
more than directive. This is just some information you're providing for us as to where we might go in the future.
Yes,
Okay.
that's
All right.
that's correct.
I understand that. Any other comments or questions from committee members? Okay. Any from members
I'm
in
sorry,
attendance?
I just like to thank you for coming to us with a proposal rather than just going to the legislature.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you about it.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, Mary McEwen with CDA. California Dental Association has not taken a position or opinion on the proposed language, but we do share similar concerns that have been expressed today regarding the DEA licenses, how the CRNAs would not be able to order, and how that would affect dentists who either do not have an anesthesia permit or have an anesthesia permit that is lower than a general anesthesia permit in ordering general anesthesia drugs. So we look forward to continuing these conversations, looking at where the law currently stands, and whether or not the proposed amendments that CANA has set forth would be in line with what is currently on books. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Moore, Cal Amos, I just want to point out one thing about the use of nurse anesthetists. I have a tendency to support this idea, but under the provisions of some of the bills that we've discussed today, if we were to have a second provider, and that second provider was a nurse anesthetist, then and then we have current competency requirements, which we would under SB 501 and under 224. The current competency requirements would be the number of pediatric cases you have to do in order to renew your permit. If you use a second provider, you can't meet the current competency, and so in one cycle, it would eliminate all the providers that were required to have a second provider. I just want to point that out. That's one of the poison pills, let's say, in 224. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Yes.
Yeah, so I have one comment. Okay, so one bill suggested that the general anesthesia, we have to have a second GA permit holder in addition to the operating dentist and one support staff. That's one bill, 244. And then now we have 501 that's saying that the CRNA who can provide general anesthesia in the general office that is supervised by the dentist. So I guess I'm confused. If the dentist who has to have a GA permit holder and has a CRNA in the office to provide general anesthesia, but then that dentist will also have to supervise the CRNA who's doing the surgery. So now we have, so how's that supervision, taking place? So I'm confused about that. I have absolutely no problem with the qualification of CRNAs. I've received treatment from CRNAs before. I'm still here, so I don't know. But I think that it just seems to me there's contradictions in some of these provisions that really need to be ironed out. So I'm just hoping that moving forward, we need to have that all reconciled. Anyway, okay, thank you.
And we have the same concern. The California Association of Nurse Anesthetists, 93% of counties in California depend on nurse anesthetists with an independent scope of practice. And we are very concerned that letting language into bills that calls for supervision of nurse anesthetists where it is expressly not required by the state of California or by Medicare, any of the federal agencies, will just lead to a path of reduced access because there's facilities that really depend on our services and communities that depend on the services we provide. So we're very afraid of that.
Yeah, thank you. And also, if we're talking about the dentist has to have a GA permit before you can have another GA provider in your office, then that basically rules me out as a GP who wants to bring on an anesthesiologist to provide care in my office. That can't happen if I want to use CRNA, for example, because I'm not a GA permit. And so, you know what I'm saying? You see where I'm going with this? So there's just some contradictions, and I don't think that the two bills complement each other, or really, I mean, you know, so I think those things just need to be brought out. And as a GP, and if I want to bring on, because now that I can't provide good minimal oral conscious sedation to my patients because I can only use one single dose of one single drug, and I want to bring, you know, CRNAs to my office where I can't, so there goes access to care. My patient can't receive care. So, again, I know I'm going around and around, but you know where I'm coming from. Thank you.
The one thing that I can say about CRNA practice is we're the providers that, looking at the percentage of Medi-Cal, Denti-Cal, and low-income providers, nurse anesthetists by far provide the most services to that population in the state of California. And so our services are affordable. We actually receive less reimbursement from Medi-Cal. That was in an effort to increase access and promote affordability. So I think there's a lot of reasons to use CRNAs, but we're completely in favor of having a dentist have the anesthesia provider of choice in their office. And so we believe in choice and all kinds of providers being available for the service.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, moving on to agenda item number 7, public comments on items not on the agenda. Committee may not discuss or take any action on any matters raised during this public comment section that is not included on this agenda, except whether to decide to place the matter on an agenda for a future meeting. So do we have any members of the public that have any comments to make on agendas, items not on the current agenda? Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item number 8, future agenda items. Stakeholders are encouraged to propose items for possible consideration by the committee at a future meeting. Are there any items, agenda items, stakeholders would encourage us to discuss at future meetings? Okay, with that not said, okay. Moving on to number 9, committee members. Any comments on items not on the agenda by committee members for future agenda items? Okay. Then I will call this committee adjourned. I don't need to take a vote on that, do I?
No.
No, okay.
Thank you, everyone. So this concludes our meeting for today. We will go into recess until 9 a.m. tomorrow. I don't anticipate needing a closed session tomorrow. So see you all there, and we'll begin with the agenda items, resume and do our committee reports, and move forward from there. Thank you.